Chapter 312, Patrolling Yiksha, 1. Hoo. At this moment, that creature let out a howl that propagated several thousands of meters. What is that creature? Wang Xian asked Imo Shiwu as he looked at the vague silhouette of a marine animal within the mist. Dragon King, that's the patrolling Yiksha, a creature that existed in mythology. Imo Shiwu looked ahead and continued, according to records, there were immortal islands in the past. Some of these immortal islands could move above the sea, some could hide themselves and some even had divine beasts guarding them. Patrolling Yiksha is a type of guardian beast in these records. They stationed themselves in a sea region and patrolled the surrounding waters. Their intelligence is extremely high and they possess horrifying strength. As Imo Shiwu spoke and looked at the patrolling Yiksha, his expression turned gloomy. Many patrolling Yikshas are surrounding this spiritual island. Their strength is horrifying. When they are in the seas, even inborn experts have to be careful. Moreover, based on my discovery, this island isn't ordinary. It could be moved. Although the movements aren't significant, there's no doubt that it could be shifted. Some experts estimate that this was a floating island. Floating island? Wang Xian was taken aback and revealed a shocked expression. Floating island. This wasn't an island that floats in the skies but on the surface of the seas. A stone would still sink when thrown into the sea. Yet, an island could actually float on the surface of the sea. That's truly magical. The entire island spanned several dozens of kilometers. A cruise sank after trying to enter the white mist but was wrecked by the patrolling Yikshas around the island. The number of patrolling Yikshas wouldn't be less than 30. Imo Shiwu continued his introduction of the island. What's the situation now? It's going to be night time soon. What are they waiting for? Wang Xian looked at the sky before turning to the 20-odd ships a short distance from him. Based on what an expert has said, when night falls, the surrounding white mist will disappear. Entering at night is far safer than trying to enter during the day. Imo Shiwu continued, when the moon rises and the white mist dissipates, all the ships will charge forward. At that time, occupying an area will be dependent on one's strength and luck. Wang Xian nodded his head slightly. He looked to the patrolling Yiksha and a thought struck him suddenly. When you receive my order in a while, enter the spiritual island immediately. I'll go handle the patrolling Yikshas, Wang Xian said to them. He removed the watch from his wrist and dived into the sea. Yes, young master. Bam! When Wang Xian dived into the sea, he noticed the members of the Dragon Palace were hiding in the depths of the sea. He turned to his left and looked over. He saw several human figures within the sea and they were looking at the spiritual island. Ha! They must be water attribute cultivators. Wang Xian thought to himself. Therefore, he did not turn into a dragon immediately and instead swam deeper towards the bottom of the sea. When he reached a depth of approximately 110 meters, night had fallen. Below the surface, it was completely dark. Looking down, one would feel that the seabed was within an abyss. However, day or night had no difference for Wang Xian considering his current strength. He swam and met up with the members of the Dragon Palace. After which, he stood on the Prime Minister Turtle. Greetings, Dragon King. The group of Dragon Palace members greeted him respectfully. Let's go. Wang Xian gestured for the Prime Minister Turtle to swim forward. Standing on the back of the Prime Minister Turtle, he looked at the spiritual island. Rumble. Prime Minister Turtle moved his huge body and swam slowly towards the seabed. Soon, they entered the region that was previously shrouded in white mist. The moment he entered this region, Wang Xian instantly felt some marine animals staring at them. What horrifying senses! They discovered us the moment we entered this region. Wang Xian squinted his eyes and looked above him. From above, savage and fearsome patrolling Yikshas charged towards them one after another. There were a total of 10 patrolling Yikshas and the largest of them all was approximately 4 meters. One of their arms resembled powerful weapons and was even longer than their bodies. Water flowed rapidly past their bodies. Hoo. Scram! A cry sounded. From the cry, Wang Xian understood that they were asking him to scram. 10 patrolling Yakshas stood in a row. Savageness gleamed in their eyes as they stared at Wang Xian and the group without fear. Patrolling Yaksha, Level 9. Extractable Dragon Energy, 38,756. Patrolling Yaksha, Level 10. Extractable Dragon Energy, 155,434. A Level 10 and 9 Level 9 Patrolling Yakshas. Wang Xian showed contempt on his face as he stood on the back of Prime Minister Turtle, looking down on the patrolling Yakshas. Let us into the island or die. Rumble. As Wang Xian spoke, Prime Minister Turtle, Roving Heavens and other members of the Dragon Palace stared harshly at the patrolling Yaksha ahead of them. From them, horrifying vibes started emanating. Everyone is forbidden from entering. The 10 patrolling Yakshas did not back off. At this moment, one of the patrolling Yakshas drew a conch out suddenly. Hoo. A faint but rapid voice sounded and propagated several kilometers through the sea. One could even hear it from the surface of the sea. What's that sound? On the sea surface, the crowd heard the rapid voices on their ships and were baffled. Look! The patrolling Yakshas within the white mist have disappeared. They have dived into the sea. Patrolling Yakshas are highly intelligent. Can it be that they knew we would be charging in and therefore are thinking of ambushing us? The crowd was doubtful and turned solemn. At this moment, the moon had risen. Faint moonlight shrouded the sea surface, revealing the mysterious spiritual island gradually. With their enhanced sight as martial artists, they could vaguely see an exceptionally beautiful island bristling with life that was surfacing on the sea surface. All of their eyes were burning with thrill and desire. Nonetheless, they didn't dare to charge forward at this moment. At this very moment, approximately 100 patrolling Yakshas had gathered in front of Wang Xian below the sea. At the forefront was a 6-meter-tall patrolling Yaksha. His arms acted like powerful weapons. When he stood up, one could see he had a long fishtail. Water flowed above his arms as horrifying vibes were emitted from it. Get out of here or die, the powerful patrolling Yaksha at the forefront glowered at Wang Xian and said. Wang Xian smiled and looked at the crowd of patrolling Yakshas. Among them, there were 10 level 10 while the rest were level 9. Patrolling Yakshas. Not bad, not bad. Wang Xian scanned across the 100 patrolling Yakshas as he rubbed his chin. Based on mythology, patrolling Yakshas were responsible for patrolling the vicinity of the Dragon Palace. Since the Dragon Palace was about to be built, these patrolling Yakshas appeared at the right time as they could become the patrolling guards for the Dragon Palace. Nope. When I build my Dragon Palace, they should be called Patrolling Dragon Shah. The name still sounds a little weird. Surrender or die. Chapter 313, Yaksha subdued, off to the spiritual island. As Wang Xian's voice blasted through the sea, an overwhelming aura of dragon power buried the crowd of Yakshas beneath. Powerful forces from Roving Heavens, Prime Minister Turtle, Roving Girl, and Roving Lobster aided in the overwhelming aura. Scram, or perish, the centermost Yaksha warned. Waving its weapon-like arm, the Yaksha carried forth a powerful surge of water and aimed it straight at Wang Xian and gang. The Yaksha showed not the slightest fear towards them. Scram, or perish, the Yaksha warned again. In synchronized movements, the remaining Yakshas and their leader aimed the weapons in their arms directly towards Wang Xian and gang. With actions so uniform, they could pass off as an army. Good. Splendid. Wang Xian complimented. Admiring their discipline, he looked on at the Yakshas with increasing satisfaction. As he did, he swung an arm and ordered, "Get a hold on them," before subduing them all. "At your command, Dragon King," replied Roving Heavens along with the rest of the Dragon Palace members. With an electrifying aura, they lunged directly at the Yakshas. Wang Xian had no regard for the Yakshas, even with the presence of a level 11 expert amongst their group of 100. Based on the current abilities of the Dragon Palace members, the Devil Division led by Roving Heavens along with the 9 venomous sea snakes would suffice in wiping the Yakshas out. Intruders shall die, the Yakshas roared once again in unison. With knife-like coordination, they attacked Roving Heavens and the gang head-on. Ha! The group of Yakshas jeered as they swung their arm weapons at the same moment. A water swirl formed atop the forks on their arms and spiraled at frightening speeds. Viroom! Roving Heavens let out a roar. With a baton in hand, he charged at the level 11 Yaksha standing at the center in a bid to attack. Bam! Unfazed, the Yaksha struck back at Roving Heavens head-on with his weapon-like arms. Ack, 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 ack! Screeched the crowd of devil monkeys. As they maneuvered underwater, darting like bouts of devil shadows, they seized at the 100 or so Yakshas. But the Yakshas responded with neither panic nor confusion. Instead, they stood single file like experienced warriors and extended their arm-like weapons. Boom! A terrifying force from their weapons surged like massive currents and headed straight for the devil monkeys. They condensed the flows into a mass, and as the sea waters tumbled, a sea spear was formed. As it emerged, it struck at the devil monkeys like an impending crisis. Water Veil! Restore peace to the seas, a spirited voice commanded. It was Queen Clam. As she flapped the shells on her sides and swung her arms, streaks of blue water flow gathered in front of the devil monkeys. Her shell was slowly turning sapphire, and it appeared more translucent than before. Let there be calm seas and fair winds, the 9 venomous sea snakes ordered. Rattling their tails, they opened their 9 mouths wide. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew amidst the ocean and surged towards the waves which were crashing toward the devil monkeys. Swoosh! Together, the water veil and powerful gale managed to combat the attacks by the Yakshas. But even so, the facial expressions on the 100-odd Yakshas remained constant. Under the leader's command, the Yakshas initiated another attack, with the group changing stance in one swift movement. Brandishing their weapons, and aided by a strong force from the waters, the Yakshas charged forth at Roving Heavens and the devil monkeys. In one sweep, the force glided through the seas. Like a giant halberd, it scoured through everything in its path. Such a powerful attack. To think that 100 Yakshas can make defense this hard for the Devil Division, Wang Xian uttered in shock as he continued watching the 100-odd Yakshas. The Yakshas had attacked in a very synchronized manner. As they did, they induced the surrounding waters along to aid in attack. This heightened their terrifying prowess. With only a couple more level 10 experts than the Devil Division, the group of 100-odd Yakshas had curbed the attack of the division which had a strength of 800. Had it not been for the help from Queen Clam and 9 venomous sea snakes, many devil monkeys would have been seriously injured from the attack earlier. You have a death wish. Roving Heavens snarled. As he watched his suppressed juniors, he snapped in a grimace. Baring his fangs, his body lit up in appalling devil flames as he flung himself towards the Yakshas. Roar! 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 The devil monkeys howled as the ferocity in them was ignited. Hair standing on end, they flashed their sharp claws and pounced along. TSK, TSK, TSK. Hissed the 9 venomous sea snakes nearby, slithering with increasing speed as they did. Staring coldly at 9 level 10 Yakshas with their eyes, they charged forth at them in a flash. With one leap, Roving Lobster joined in on the attack. Using both of its giant pincers, it snipped away at the Yakshas. All manpower from the Dragon Palace was out in full force. In an instant, the surrounding seas cowered under the majestic awe of the divine dragon. Schools of fish nearby swam far away, scrambling for safety. As they cleared the area, the sea appeared all the more vast and deep, which added on to the spookiness. What's happening? Why are there bouts of terrifying forces surging from the sea? It's giving me the shudders, one shrieked. Such threatening force. What exactly is happening up front? Another quivered. Didn't they say that this is the historical site of a level 1 ancient sect? Why would there be waves of such terrifying forces otherwise? A third gulped. On the boats in surrounding waters, all people on board cast their glance towards the waters. With the horrendous force surging and the irregular waves, it set everyone out in fear and trepidation. On the deck of a large fishing vessel stood several elders. As they looked down at the seas, their eyes began to fill with dread. To think that a tidal wave had reversed in direction. This tremendous force is no doubt terrifying. As for the creature beneath, it must be from the Dan realm at the very least. The ocean, how appalling! An elder shook with a heavy look. What should we do, then? Are we still vying for this spiritual island? Don't forget that this is an ancient first-class island we're looking at. Who knows, the spiritual medicine from its garden could even be on par with those from spiritual medicine gardens of the saint class, another elder reminded. With burning desire in his eyes, he continued, what's more, given that this is a first-class force, they're bound to possess treasures. In ancient times, all the sects and clans were either located within famous mountains and rivers, or on peninsula islands. Idolized by all as the land of the sacred. An ancient first-class force is now on par with a current sacred sect. Hence we cannot give this spiritual island up. Just wait a while longer, another elder concluded. Despite the apprehension owing to the force surging from the deep waters, no one was willing to give up in the face of such an alluring spiritual island. Waiting in silence, they were all bidding for their opportunity. Young master has given his orders. Charge, a voice shouted. Meanwhile, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu were on a yacht when they heard the command. Hearts raced, and the trio locked eyes for a split moment before glancing ahead. With one leap, they dashed for the spiritual island. Someone made their move, one shouted. Having a death wish. It's akin to courting doom. Such terrifying forces are coming from the seas. Yet they still dare to charge over. We'll see. They'll be killed by the marine creatures soon enough, a second mocked. It's Mo Shiwu and the gang he has called. This fellow fights pretty well, but it appears he's not very good with his intellect, the third commented. Just as well, someone to help us lead the way, another bystander cheered. As the trio charged forward, the crowd looked on with astonishment, but continued nonetheless in anticipation. In moments, however, they were met with surprise and bewilderment as their faces dimmed. They managed faintly. With racing speed, the trio flew inside the island parameters, eventually landing on the island without the slightest impediment. Chapter 314, The Spiritual Island That Was Overrun by Monster. They got in. They actually got in. How can this be? Where are the patrolling yakshas? Why didn't the guarding animals under the sea surface appear? This is bad. Now that 3 men have entered, should we follow them in? At this moment, the 3 other forces that had gathered in the vicinity were stuck in a dilemma. 3 men had charged towards the spiritual island. In the end, they were able to get in easily without any obstruction. This embarrassed the other 3 forces. These 3 forces were all first-class forces. They were Lei family from Motive, Wind God sect from Dafeng Mountain and Water Separation Island from the Sea Islands. When they saw Mo Qinglong and the other 2 men enter the spiritual island, they were bitter and furious. We can't continue to wait like this. Otherwise, all the good stuff will be taken away by those 3 people. We have to get through too. On a huge fishing boat, several old men's eyes shimmered. In that case, who will test it out first? Another old man seemed conflicted. He looked down at the sea surface and still felt heart-wrenching powers from the bottom of the sea. Since the 3 of them got through without any trouble, we shouldn't be in danger either. Elders, we can first test it out with a yacht. If the yacht isn't wrecked, we will not be in any danger, said a middle-aged man while frowning. Under such circumstances, no one had the guts to charge forward despite seeing others entering the spiritual island. Try it out immediately, the old man from Lei family ordered. Subsequently, a yacht charged towards the spiritual island. When the other 2 forces saw it, they frowned. They were also waiting. Once their safety could be verified, they would charge ahead immediately. Charge! When the yacht reached the spiritual island, the surrounding crowd could no longer hold back their urge as they charged rapidly towards the spiritual island. In an instant, a few hundred men flew over directly. At this very moment, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu, who had entered the spiritual island first, were carefully observing the ruins of an ancient sect. All of them were shocked. White flowers were grown around the entire spiritual island, and these flowers were producing a faint mist. The surrounding white mist had all originated from these flowers. The entire spiritual island was beautiful. However, weeds had overrun some places as no humans had lived on it for a long time. On a stone path, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu looked in shock at what was before them. A footprint. It was a huge footprint that was approximately 4 meters long and was deeply imprinted on the ground. What kind of animal would have left this footprint? How can it be so horrifying? Mo Qinglong and the group looked ahead and discovered other huge footprints that were all around the entire spiritual island. Around the footprints were several sets of human remains. Some had decomposed, leaving only bones behind. Many of these bones had cracked. It was clear that this was caused by huge physical impacts. Can it be that this spiritual island on the sea encountered an attack by terrifying animals in the sea, leading to the annihilation of the entire sect? The three of them were baffled. They looked to the side and found several collapsed brick houses around them. Some were even more than 50% destroyed. It was clear that these houses were knocked down by a terrifying animal. Mo Qinglong and the group turned their attention ahead. In the middle of the island, there was a huge training ground. Before the training ground was a row of buildings. These buildings were 15 to 16 meters tall. However, even the tops of these buildings had large holes. Who would have expected the entire spiritual island to actually be wrecked by a horrifying animal in the sea? Mo Qinglong was shocked. He moved and approached the central region of the island rapidly. Based on common understanding, the central location was where most treasures were kept. Moreover, spiritual medicine gardens would typically be placed in the central region. Split up and search for treasures. Mo Qinglong instructed Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu before diving towards a building. No one knew how long ago the sect on the spiritual island had been annihilated. All the buildings had clear signs of weathering. When they entered the room, they immediately started searching it. This is a depository of books. All the books here are really precious and valuable. Mo Qinglong scanned across the room. After which, he headed for another room. A depository of books wasn't particularly useful for them. This must be the accommodation of the higher management of the sect. Mo Qinglong entered another room. After looking around, he immediately started searching the room. At this moment, Mo Yuan shouted, "Master, the spiritual medicine garden is here." Mo Qinglong moved and charged over immediately. Spiritual medicine gardens typically contain the most precious resources of a sect. The spiritual medicine garden was located at the back. At that place, there was a pond that spanned approximately a dozen mu. Within the pond and around the pond, various spiritual medicines were planted. Beside the spiritual medicine garden were several sets of remains. There were 4 huge footprints in the spiritual medicine garden. A substantial number of spiritual grasses were dead, but there were still several hundred tufts of spiritual grass that were still emitting spiritual energy. It was especially so for the huge lotus flower in the middle of the pond. The lotus flower was the size of a basin. Amidst the darkness of the night, it was still glowing in white light. The middle of the lotus flower was an entirely white lotus seed pod with countless lotus seeds in it. One could easily tell that the lotus flower, lotus seed pod and lotus seeds weren't ordinary. Mo Qinglong looked across the spiritual medicine garden and his eyes lit up. Plucking these spiritual medicines away will be a waste. The best option is to let them continue growing here before plucking their fruits. Mo Qinglong looked around him. The most precious of them all should be the white lotus flower in the middle of the pond and a spiritual tree beside it. That spiritual tree had already reached a height of 6 to 7 meters. Based on Mo Qinglong's understanding, this spiritual tree was known as green fruit tree. This spiritual tree should have reached level 5 or 6. Therefore, it shouldn't be called a spiritual medicine but a spiritual tree instead. Other than that, there were at least 50 to 60 tufts of level 4 and 5 spiritual grass and over 100 tufts of level 3 and below spiritual grass. Perhaps it was because this spiritual island had been deserted for 500 to 600 years or for an even longer time. With no one harvesting these spiritual grasses, there were a lot of them around. The value of these spiritual grasses alone is astronomical. Mo Qinglong and the group thought to themselves. I found it first. Get lost. I held it in my hands first. Scram or I'll kill you. Do you think my Lei family is afraid of your water separation island? At this moment, noises came from behind them. Several hundred people from Water Separation Island, Lei family, and the Wind God's sect had dashed over. The quiet spiritual island became raucous instantly. Although they were shocked by the humongous footprints that were left behind, they were getting frenzied over the treasures they were seeing. The spiritual medicine garden is here. At this moment, a few young men dashed over. Seeing the spiritual grass in front of Mo Qinglong and the group, they were thrilled. Chapter 3:15, Joining Forces. The spiritual medicine garden is here, a voice boomed. As it sounded across the entire spiritual island, all bickering and commotion elsewhere came to a standstill. In an instant, figures could be seen darting over at electrifying speeds. Across the sky, 9 inborn experts soared through the air. When they saw the various treasures in the spiritual medicine garden, their eyes blazed with desire. With a shrug, they hopped onto the fringes of the garden. A level 6 spiritual medicine, goodness! To think it's the level 6 White Valley Lotus. Aha! A ripe White Valley Lotus, one exclaimed in elation. A green fruit tree. Such a level 6 tree can produce 6 level 5 spiritual fruits in a year. While the overripened fruits have fallen and turned into compost, another said excitedly. Dozens of level 5 spiritual grasses, and plenty more of those of level 3 to 4, a third cheered. A crazed look swept across the 9 inborn experts. As they scanned their surroundings, their cold stares were overcome by burning desire at the sight of the spiritual medicine aplenty. Should they be able to obtain these spiritual medicine, it would no doubt double the prowess of their clans right away. What's more, they may even attain sacred sect status given long-term cultivation of this entire plot, but only if they could possess it. This was especially so, as this spiritual island happened to be a rare floating island. This meant that the island was able to move along the ocean, making it an ideal spiritual land. In addition, there were white flowers growing along the perimeters which emitted a misty fog. Aside from camouflaging effects, the flora could also help gather spiritual energy. Amidst the oceans, this piece of land was surrounded by unpolluted air. Hence its concentration of spiritual energy definitely outweighed those from the cities. The inborn experts pondered as their eyes twinkled. Meanwhile, disciples of the various forces gathered behind their clan experts, keeping a vigilant watch over the surroundings. In the brief fight earlier, some of these disciples had already sustained injuries. To compete based on merits, a middle-aged elder asked blandly. With a glum face, he cast his glance towards the 6 inborn experts from the Lei family and Water Separation Island. To which, the inborn experts kept mum, as they continued eyeing each other in order to assess one another's abilities. The strengths of the Lei family, Water Separation Island, and Wind God's sect were neck and neck. This time around, each of them was represented by 3 inborn experts. Perhaps variations existed between individual inborn experts. Yet, should they really start fighting, the outcome remained to be seen. But one thing was certain, some of them would perish. The 9 inborn experts continued to observe each other, and in an instant, tension filled the atmosphere. Meanwhile, the disciples crowding behind gripped their weapons with a heavy look. A fight could break out any moment now. I don't think it would do any of us any good should we start battling it out now. Unless any of you are confident in annihilating the other party. Otherwise, it's bad news to all even if only one should escape, an elder from Water Separation Island chipped in as he surveyed the 6 inborn experts. When the 3 leveled forces really started fighting, it would not be surprising should they end up with a Pyrrhic victory. Whereas if only one party should win marginally, and should information about the spiritual island be divulged, then they would be bound to be attacked by other sects and clans. Who knows, they may even face being seized by sacred sects. All this for one floating island, given its high value. In fact, it was so superior it could make a good sect ground. Giving thought to his analysis, the inborn experts from the Lay family and Wind God sect agreed with the elder from Water Separation Island. An equal division then, an elder from the Lay family asked as he squinted, testing the reaction of others. How are we going to do that? This floating island is one huge gem. Smiling, the elder from Water Separation Island replied, how about this? We from the Water Separation Island will take the floating island alone, while you can have everything else. Wishful thinking, an elder from the Lay family snapped. The worth of the entire floating island was no less than the spiritual medicine garden, the secret manual it held, and the like combined. Just then, the elder from Water Separation Island who spoke earlier uttered, ever thought of establishing a Saint-class force? As he finished, the inborn experts from Wind God sect and Lay family could not help but flinch. They took one look at the crowd around them before turning towards the spiritual grass which was nestled in the garden, and breathed somewhat heavily. Should the 3 parties join forces, and give it a little more than a decade, they could really end up setting a Saint-class force for all we know. A sacred sect. One immensely massive entity. But, to have 3 forces coming together to set up one sacred sect is a huge matter, where interests are complicated and stakes are high. It would take days to sort everything out. What we'll have to do now, is to hide this spiritual island. To keep it away from the other forces. As for its allocation, the 3 forces shall discuss it thereafter, an elder from the Lay family suggested steadily. All right, one nodded. Agreed, another seconded the thought. Instead of fighting and vying ourselves to our deaths, we might as well join forces. The 9 inborn experts laughed. To them, this was the best choice possible. Gentlemen, it appears that you've yet to ask for our take, Mo Qinglong interrupted. He was with Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu meanwhile. As he spoke, the trio frowned and scanned the crowd. Huh. Oops, we've forgotten about the few outsiders, an elder joked as he surveyed the trio. Outsiders? We made a pact back then. To inform the forces that joined later, and split the share of this spiritual island. Mo Shiwu rebuked while peering at a few young men from the 3 forces. True enough. We've indeed made a pact. To vie for the treasures based on our own merits, a voice argued. That's right. And the treasures are right here. Take them with you if you've got what it takes, another challenged. Huh. Mo Shiwu, if you've got what it takes, you may take all the treasures here with you right away. But if you don't, a third gloated. Thereafter, several young men from each of the 3 forces stepped out and smirked as they eyed Mo Shiwu. Show us what you've got. Otherwise, you're not fit to get an equal share of the treasures as us, a young man provoked once again, this time annoying Mo Shiwu. You ingrates. Had I not rescued the few of you at the start, you fellows would have died at the hands of the Yikshas long ago. Mo Shiwu snapped as he glared at them. Humph, weren't you also protecting yourself by saving us? Don't take the moral high ground, a young man criticized as he stared right back. Folks, how would you suggest we handle these 3, an elder of the Lay family asked the inborn experts sarcastically. Vying for the treasures with us leaves us with no choice but to strike, an elder announced as he stepped forward with a faint grin. Gradually, 3 experts from the Lay family and Water Separation Island began to follow suit. They had their eyes fixed on Mo Qinglong and gang with a deathly stare. To which, Mo Qinglong and the gang responded with a burdened look. Chapter 316, The Roar of the Devil Monkey. On the spiritual island, one inborn expert from Lay family, Water Separation Island and Wind God sect respectively stepped forward and looked at Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu with contempt. They walked over slowly with their weapons in their hands, glowing in a chilling light. You guys must be courting death. Mo Qinglong's eyes were filled with killing intent as he stared at the three inborn experts walking towards them. Devilish aura started circling around his body. Mo Yuan transformed his fingers into claws and stared at the approaching group harshly. Hee hee. Devilish cultivators. It seems like we are going to eradicate devils for the benefit of the world. An old man turned solemn after noticing the dense devilish aura being emitted from their bodies. Kill the three of them, an old man shouted. Subsequently, he jumped ahead and charged towards Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu. The three inborn experts reached Mo Qinglong and the group in an instant. The stifling pressure of an inborn expert was mixed with their dense killing intent. The three inborn experts had no plans to hide their aura and killing intent at all. At this moment, Wang Xian, who was on the seabed, did not know about the intense battle that was going on at the spiritual island. Wang Xian smiled faintly and looked ahead. In front of him, 100 patrolling Yikshas were pinned down on the floor with grave injuries under the attacks from the Devil Division, 9 venomous sea snakes, roving lobster, and roving girl. Surrender to me or die. Wang Xian stood on the back of Prime Minister Turtle, shrouded his dragon power towards all the patrolling Yikshas and spoke coldly. I surrender. The leader of the patrolling Yikshas looked at Wang Xian and the group in horror. Gradually, he lifted his head. Great. This will be the wisest choice you make in your lifetime. The Dragon Palace shall be separated into 9 divisions in the future. The Devil Division has since been established. Today, I shall confer on you, leader of patrolling Yikshas, as the Dragon Guard Division. You shall patrol the 4 seas and guard the Dragon Palace. I shall also bestow upon you the name of Roving Yiksha. As Wang Xian spoke, he waved his hands. Drops of essence blood entered the patrolling Yikshas' heads as Wang Xian smiled. Devil Division was the main battle strength against the enemies. As for the Dragon Guard Division, they would be responsible for patrolling the surroundings of the Dragon Palace and protecting it. Although there were only 100 patrolling Yikshas, the strength and battle prowess they demonstrated when they worked together were incomparably horrifying. Moreover, they could move extremely fast in the water. Even Wang Xian was astonished at their speed. In water, they possessed a speed that even the 9 venomous sea snakes couldn't match. However, if the 9 venomous sea snakes were above the sea surface, their speed would be a lot faster than it was in the seas. Thank you, Dragon King. Greetings, Dragon King. The leader of the patrolling Yikshas bowed down in a unique manner as he remarked. Greetings, Dragon King. The surrounding patrolling Yiksha followed, kneeling down respectfully as they remarked. This is the cultivation art for the water divine dragon. Cultivate diligently in the future. A thought was sent into their minds. Subsequently, Wang Xian looked at the floating island. Bring me to the bottom of the floating island to take a look. Wang Xian said to Roving Yiksha immediately. Yes, Dragon King. After absorbing the essence blood of the divine dragon, a flash of energy beamed from the eyes of the roving Yiksha. The speed of water flowing on his body became even quicker. Dragon King, this is our old nest. We have been living under this island. After arriving at the side of the island, the roving Yiksha pointed to the bottom of the island. Wang Xian looked across inquisitively. The base of the floating island wasn't connected to the seabed. Moreover, a type of plant was growing on the bottom of the island. This plant was black in color, similar to the color of the patrolling Yikshas. They were densely packed and covered the entire bottom of the floating island. Moreover, this type of plant wasn't just a layer. Instead, there were several layers of them which formed empty spaces each layer. Wang Xian was surprised to see a 1-meter-tall Yiksha moving within these spaces. This is our nest and also our food. Roving Yiksha swam over, scraped a part of the plant using his weapon-like arm and handed it to Wang Xian. Wang Xian received it and realized it had strong buoyancy. So this plant is the reason why the island floats and can even move. Wang Xian was in awe of the mysterious things of the seas. There were all kinds of strange animals in the sea. If I convert this island to my accommodation, wouldn't it be? Wang Xian's eyes lit up. He just had to modify this floating island a little to convert it to a mobile base. In fact, he could even pull this floating island to the Bohai Sea. If he wished to go to other areas, he could also shift it to the Pacific Ocean or the Indian Ocean. A mobile fortress and base. Wang Xian's eyes burned with enthusiasm. You guys, wait for me here. I'm going to take a look at the spiritual island. After finishing his words, Wang Xian moved and swam towards the spiritual island. As the ruins of an ancient sect, there should be lots of treasures on it. Moreover, he had informed Mo Qinglong and the group to search for treasures while he was under the water. Wang Xian believed they would have obtained lots of spiritual treasures by now. The rewards this time are indeed handsome. Wang Xian revealed a faint smile and arrived on the spiritual island. Rumble. TSK. How dare you guys injure our lay family's people? Trying to grab these spiritual medicines and spiritual treasures with just the three of you? You guys must be courting death. However, he heard a furious roar that propagated through the entire spiritual island the moment he landed on shore. After which, the sounds of collision erupted. Wang Xian squinted his eyes and his expression turned cold. Cough cough. All of you shall die. A weak voice sounded. It was the voice of Mo Qinglong. Huh. Kill us. We will kill you right now. A brazen voice sounded once again. Still thinking of getting the treasures? Wishful thinking. Even if you were a pinnacle-born expert, we would still kill you. It seems like someone can't wait to die. Murderous intent gleamed in Wang Xian's eyes. Based on what Mo Shiwu had said, all treasures found should be obtained through their respective strengths. This was the agreement for the split of treasures on the spiritual island. In Wang Xian's opinion, no one in the three forces would be a match for Mo Qinglong or Mo Yuan. Based on the voice of Mo Qinglong, he was clearly injured now. In that case, there was only one possibility. A group of people had attacked them together. Rumble. Wang Xian tapped lightly on the water surface. Roving Heavens immediately raised his head above the surface. Follow me. Roving Heavens gave his orders before jumping onto the shore of the spiritual island. Below him, 800 devil monkeys followed closely behind. They were like savage beasts from the bottom of the water as they surfaced from the seas. Every single one of them had an intense devilish flame emitting from their body. Roar! Roving Heavens walked beside Wang Xian and let out a cry. With his 6-meter-tall figure, he was a towering figure beside Wang Xian. He held a golden rod in his hand. Behind him, 800 devil monkeys jumped onto the shores of the spiritual island. The horrifying auras from them masked the moon in the sky. Let's go. Wang Xian stood up gradually. The group of devil monkeys spread out before charging forward rapidly with Wang Xian. Gur gur gur. As the devil monkeys growled, the entire spiritual island trembled. Chapter 317. By merits? Gur gur gur. The devil monkeys growled. The entire spiritual island trembled as their voices blasted through the air. Wang Xian narrowed his eyes briefly as he headed towards the center of the spiritual island. With him was Roving Heavens. With a wooden rod measuring 5 to 6 meters resting on his shoulders, he followed alongside Wang Xian with a ferocious look. What's that noise? A voice quivered. Just then, inborn experts from the Lei family, Water Separation Island, and Wind God sect were at the spiritual medicine garden, when they heard the growling of the devil monkeys. To which, their faces winced as they darted their eyes around hastily. Seems like animals growling, and in large numbers, one panicked. Don't tell me monsters have ascended on Spiritual Island, the second guessed. That can't be. How could sea monsters get on the island? They must be growling in the waters, but do not approach, another reassured. Those hair-raising footprints on the island, could they have come from the same monster? A voice asked. As it was nighttime, other than the casting of faint moonlight, they were surrounded by pitch dark on this lone island in the middle of the sea. Peering into the distance around them, it felt like they were situated amidst an abyss. Given such circumstances, disciples of the three forces could not help but shiver. Especially with the growling earlier, the way it sounded and felt had petrified them all the more. "Something's approaching," an inborn expert cried out, jerking his head to the right while doing so. "Many of them," another inborn expert added as he turned right as well. "What?" the rest of the disciples behind exclaimed. Taking one deep gulp, they too looked in the same direction in utter panic. They were not being timid. Instead, having witnessed the yikshaws around the spiritual island, along with the alarming footprints inland, it became too overwhelming. They were already in fear of the creatures out at sea. "Huh. Like I've said, all of you shall die. All of you," voices laughed. It was Imo Qinglong, Imo Yuan and Imo Sherwu who were lying at his side, resting. They shot up excitedly upon hearing the growls. Bearing with their physical pains the best they could, they swept their glance coldly across the three forces ahead. "Shut up," an inborn expert snapped as he eyed the trio. With the swing of an arm, he blasted a bout of energy towards the trio. Bam, bam. The energy struck directly at Imo Qinglong and gang, which sent them flying 7 to 8 meters back, before crashing on the floor. Had it not been for their strong constitution, they would have long been killed by the blows. "Who are you trying to scare? Fear not, even if the sea creatures should ascend on the island. Their combat abilities would diminish greatly," an inborn expert assured. As he did, he raised his long sword, which was flickering with laser lights. Inhaling deeply, the disciples crowding around clutched onto their weapons. Grr, grr. As faint, deep growls which sounded like panting approached closer by the second, they sent a faint tremor across the grounds. Several hundred from the three forces gazed intently at the area ahead. Boom, boom, boom. "It has appeared," someone announced. "It's coming," another yelled. With a murderous demeanor, all men from the three forces braced themselves. They looked ahead at the shadows, which were gradually emerging. Swish! Waving an arm, an inborn expert lit up the sky ahead with a blinding flame. Boom! The flame also revealed what was in front of them. At the sight of the figures ahead, everyone stared with eyes wide, in shock. Under the bright lights, a group of creepy but human-like creatures emerged from about 500 meters ahead. They were moving towards the crowd, slowly and steadily. They were mammoth-like in size, reaching beyond 2 meters in height, with the tallest standing at almost 6 meters. They were also surrounded by balls of black gases winding around their bodies. What are those?" an inborn expert muttered in a low voice, as he looked ahead with a cringing face. There were too many of these black human-like creatures, so much so that they had way overnumbered the crowd of disciples. "Some of them look like monkeys," an inborn expert commented. While he squinted at the creatures for a closer look, he gripped his weapon more tightly. "Fear not. They're just creatures similar to the water monkeys," an inborn expert from the Lei family signaled to the disciples behind. As the two sides were closing in at about 200 meters, Wang Xian could see Imo Qinglong and gang lying by the side. "Who is it? Who gave you the audacity to attack my men?" Wang Xian asked the group of three forces as he eyed them indifferently. Surprised by the noise, the crowd immediately threw their gaze over in Wang Xian's direction. "Ha! There's someone in there?" a voice questioned. "To think there's someone across, who's controlling the group of creatures?" another asked. Only the unknown would be feared. They were actually more relieved than not, when they realized that the group of creatures was under the control of a human. An inborn expert from the Lei family swept his gaze past the group of devil monkeys. With eyes narrowed, he tightened his fists. "Brother, this is Elder Lei here. I think there must be some misunderstanding between us. I seek your understanding. Should we have offended you in any way?" the elder said to Wang Xian. "I'm asking you. Who gave you guys the courage to attack my men?" Wang Xian questioned again, ignoring Elder Lei, this time in an eerily low pitch. With a change of stance, 3 devil monkeys scrambled over to Mo Qinglong and gang, and lifted them off the ground. Young master, the 3 forces here have made an alliance. They challenged us to take the things here away, based on merits. Mo Qinglong reported to Wang Xian with a pale face. Humph. Wang Xian nodded in acknowledgement. This was followed by a powerful bout of the Azure Dragon's energy which was channeled into the trio's bodies, healing them as it went. By merits, ha! If that's the case, we'll go by merits then. Wang Xian concluded. He looked casually at the 3 forces as he nodded, and continued, if that's the case, we'll play by your rules. Ha! The crowd from the 3 forces frowned. An elder from Water Separation Island contemplated, while his facial expression changed in tandem with his thoughts. He trailed off, brother, you possess strong powers, so you're qualified to a share of the spiritual treasures on this island. That's right, we're willing to share the spiritual treasures here with you, another added. We acknowledge your powers, so that makes you qualified, a few elders patronized. But you guys are not. Wang Xian cut them off even before they could end their sentences. With that, he ordered swiftly, kill them. Ack, ack, ack. Just as Wang Xian concluded his sentence, Roving Heavens lifted his head and roared towards the sky. The long rod which rested on his shoulders crashed onto the ground. Boom! With a low rumble, Roving Heavens stared ahead with its eyes bloodshot. Slowly but steadily, it uttered in human language, kill. Kill. All around, the devil monkeys complemented loud growls, followed by a gust of demonic aura purging out of their bodies. Boom! As they transformed into numerous black shadows, they swooped straight at the hundreds from the 3 forces. Chapter 318, Zhanlu and Hao Zhong. What horrifying vibes! This. They are so powerful. When Roving Heavens led his devil division in the charge, the 8 inborn experts and the injured old inborn expert were shocked. The violent aura sent chills down their spines. Behind them, the disciples of the 3 forces trembled. Looking at the devil monkeys that were charging towards them, they felt as though they were facing a 10,000-strong army. Shit! They have multiple inborn realm existences among them. The inborn experts were shocked and felt fear grip them. Kill! An inborn expert gritted his teeth and swung the long sword he was holding upward. The glow of the sword spanned several meters and clashed towards Roving Heavens, who was at the front of the pack. Bam! Roving Heavens smashed his long metal rod towards that inborn expert domineeringly. The rod and longsword clashed. However, it was an exercise in futility, as the horrifying strength of Roving Heavens instantly broke the longsword in the hand of the inborn expert. Rumble! That inborn expert also exploded into pieces without putting up much resistance. What? How can this be possible? Seeing their companions being crushed into pieces, the group of inborn experts were petrified. How horrifying! Behind them, the crowd of disciples had witnessed what had just happened. None of them could help but shiver and take steps back. Roar! However, the group of devil monkeys charged into the crowd of the 3 forces. Arg! Soon, incessant cries sounded. Without putting up much resistance, they were completely crushed. Some of these inborn experts retreated in fear. Seeing how Roving Heavens killed several inborn experts with a single strike each, they were desolated. No! Don't kill me! Please! Don't kill me, shouted a desperate inborn expert. Just like what you have done, this is the consequences of being weak. Wang Xian glanced coldly across them and remarked emotionlessly. Since they had established these rules, they should follow them even if the rules led to their death. Roar! Roving Heavens jumped and charged ahead of the group of inborn experts in a horrifying manner. Crushing! Soon, cries started going quiet. Wang Xian looked around him. Young master! At this moment, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu, who were recuperating, had recovered. They walked deferentially to Wang Xian and explained, this is the spiritual medicine garden on the spiritual island. There are 2 level 6 spiritual medicines in it. One of them is White Valley Lotus and the other is Green Fruit Tree. Mo Qinglong pointed at the 2 spiritual medicines while looking towards the buildings behind. We have not searched the buildings. However, I believe there will definitely be lots of spiritual treasure in them. Let's go take a look. Wang Xian looked gleefully at the garden of spiritual medicine and grass. 2 level 6 spiritual medicines were more than what the Sui family had. As for the remaining level 4 and 5 spiritual grass and medicine, Wang Xian was just a little worse off than the Sui family. I'll be able to refine lots of elixir pills from these spiritual medicine and grass. At that time, I'll sell them in exchange for resources for the Dragon Palace. I should be able to gather most of the required resources. Wang Xian thought to himself. After a quick walk around the spiritual medicine garden, he headed towards the row of buildings behind it. Caw caw caw. When they entered the first room, the decayed wooden door fell to the ground instantly. Wang Xian looked around the room before pulling out different drawers enthusiastically as though he was on a treasure hunt. Ha! This is a bottle for elixir pills. Wang Xian picked up a porcelain bottle. After opening it, he found that the elixir pills in it had already become scraps. He shook his head slightly and continued his search. Within the rooms, there were all kinds of weapons and jewelry made of jade. Wang Xian even found 2 hairpins made from top-tier jade. As they combed through the different rooms, Wang Xian and the group found a substantial amount of precious treasures. Young master, there's an entrance leading underground here. At this moment, Mo Qinglong spoke to Wang Xian. Ha! Leading underground? Wang Xian's eyes lit up. He looked over and saw stairs leading underground, which he walked down immediately. This is the treasure room of the sect. When Wang Xian entered, he immediately saw various exquisite weapons and precious antiques. His eyes lit up instantly. There were paintings and calligraphy pieces hung on the walls. However, they had decayed and were thus valueless. This is. Looking ahead, Wang Xian saw a sword hung on the wall. Below it, there was a zither on the table and a box made of jade. The 3 items were in a prominent position in the treasure room. Clearly, they were also the 3 most precious objects in this treasure room. Wang Xian's attention fell on the treasured sword hung on the wall. Wang! Just as Wang Xian contacted it, the treasured sword seemed to tremble. This gave Wang Xian a shock. He held the sword scabbard tightly. The entire sword was over 100 kilograms. For a long sword, this was really heavy. Wang Xian's eyes burned fervently. Holding the hilt of the sword lightly, he drew it out slowly. Caw! A crisp voice sounded. A dazzling gold light shimmered and the sharpness of the sword made Wang Xian's arm tremble a little. Great sword! What a sharp sword! Wang Xian stared at the long sword. Suddenly, a message appeared in his mind. Zhan Lu, level 10. Spiritual sword. This is a spiritual sword. Zhan Lu. Oh gosh. This is Zhan Lu. Wang Xian was shocked and thrilled. Zhan Lu was one of the 10 famed swords and regarded as the best among the 5 unparalleled famed swords. It was said that it was forged over 3 years using the best metal and within a cold spring. I had not expected this to be Zhan Lu, one of the 10 famed swords in history. This historic sword was forged by O Yezi. In that case, O Yezi must be a grandmaster blacksmith. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to forge a famed sword classified as one of the 10 famed swords. Wang drew the famed sword out of its scabbard completely. The bronze shade and the sharp aura around it were dazzling. Wang Xian moved his arm and injected metal attribute energy into it. Instantly, a sharp glow covered the sword. From a far place, one could already sense the sharpness of the sword. Great, great! Zhan Lu is known to be the sword of benevolence or the sword of the king. I can use this. Wang Xian laughed and put the sword aside. After which, he looked to the zither below it. A zither that could be placed with Zhonlu would definitely not be ordinary. Hao Zhong. The zither was made of wood. However, Wang Xian noticed that the wood showed no signs of decay despite the passing of a few hundreds of years. Moreover, it looked just like a new zither. Wang Xian moved slightly and the information on the zither appeared in his mind too. Hao Zhong, level 10. It's another level 10 spiritual object. This zither wasn't simple, but Wang Xian had no use for it and didn't know how to use it. Looking at this extremely stunning zither, Wang Xian picked it up to take a closer look. There's another long sword below the zither. Enchantment sword. It seems like the sword and the zither come in a set. This sword is level 9. What a great treasure. Chapter 319, The Wood Dragon Ball. Wang Xian was pleasantly surprised by the two spiritual treasures, namely the ancient sword of Zhonlu, and the zither of Hao Zhong. Wang Xian had no use for the zither. On the other hand, he was very fond of the sword. He was not versed in swordplay. Nonetheless, the childhood dream of venturing the world and helping the underprivileged as a chivalrous swordsman remained rooted at the back of his mind. Knights looked suave as they wielded their long swords, their main choice of weapon. Swish, attack at lightning speed. Swash, take the counter-strike. Wang Xian grinned as he role-played with the sword, before his sight landed on the remaining jade box. A container carved out of emerald. Just the container alone is worth hundreds of millions. Wang Xian exclaimed as he picked it up for assessment. It was not particularly heavy, glowing in emerald green translucence. It looked incredibly invaluable. What's this? Wang Xian quizzed. As he opened the container, he was stunned at the sight of a jade-green orb. A message flashed across his mind. Golden Rain Tree with Spiritual Bead, level 10. Spiritual Bead of the Golden Rain Wood. A level 10 with Spiritual Bead. Wang Xian exclaimed with an astounded look. Wang Xian had come across many spiritual beads. For instance, the two spiritual flame balls of the Sui family, the two spiritual beads which he received from Flame Palace and Fire God denomination, as well as the ones which he had obtained right from the beginning. But this was the first time in which he came across a spiritual bead of another element. I can totally refine this level 10 spiritual bead and transform it into a Dragon Ball. A wood element Dragon Ball. Wang Xian uttered to himself. Picking it up gently, Wang made a light swirl of the spiritual bead on his palm. Drops of his essence blood seeped into the bead as it brimmed with life. Soon after, he opened his mouth and absorbed the spiritual bead into his body. Given the nourishment from his dragon energy, the wood element spiritual bead would transform into a wood dragon ball, which would also possess incredible powers. Furthermore, a wood dragon ball is able to improve land air ability. By placing it on a spiritual medicine garden, it would greatly boost the growth of spiritual medicine within the area. A huge profit we've made this time. Wang Xian cheered as he admired the ancient sword of Zhonlu, wood element spiritual beads, along with other spiritual medicine and treasures of the like. This included the invaluable floating island. To him, these were priceless treasures. Thereafter, he flipped through the treasure trove once more, but could no longer find anything more valuable than the things which he had on hand. Wang Xian exited the treasure trove and continued searching in the neighboring rooms. As they came to a room within one of the central grand halls, Wang Xian and gang discovered the name of the sect which had settled on this spiritual island. The island was named Wood Mirage, eponymous to the sect which had settled on it. Stone tablets lined the rooms of the grand halls. Based on records carved on one of them, it stated that there were more than 2,000 disciples on this Wood Mirage Island. Amongst them was a Laozu, who had attained abilities of the Dan realm. An ancient first-class sect would be on par with a current sacred sect, Wang Xian said, trailing off. He sighed as he looked at information on the stone tablet. While making his way out, he was surprised by the giant footprint ahead which measured close to 4 meters. A footprint up to 4 meters in length. The monster with this footprint must tower over 20 meters in height. It's enough to topple houses hovering at 16 meters, Wang Xian thought to himself as he assessed the extent of the damage around him. It was no surprise for a monster of over 20 meters in length to exist within the oceans. After all, the blue whale measured more than 30 meters, while a sperm whale could reach over 20 meters. And these were known mammoths on Earth, so it only meant that there were still many out there which were yet to be discovered. While a blue whale may be gigantic, its combat abilities were much weaker, which made it an ordinary species. Dawn had arrived by the time Wang Xian completed his tour around the island. As he arrived at the sea, deep in thought, he was immediately received by Roving Yiksha. Dragon King. Roving Yiksha greeted. How do we go about moving this island? What's the fastest speed at which it could move? Wang Xian asked Roving Yiksha in response. Now that he owned the island, Wang Xian was preparing to put the island through a series of refurbishments. Turning the entire island into his ideal wonderland, for some future fun, seemed like a good choice. In this way, there was no future need for cruise ships, for he could simply ride on the island. That sounded really cool just by the mere thought of it. Dragon King, moving the island requires aid from an external force. This can either be a powerful source of wind or tidal energy, or physical strength, Roving Yiksha explained. He continued, the island isn't too heavy, given that it's currently floating on the sea. Even we Yikshas are able to move it. That said, our moving speed will be very slow, as we can only shift it between the time of sunrise to sunset. Hence the distance moved will not be significant, he ended. Nodding in acknowledgement, Wang Xian gave a faint smile. So long as the island can be shifted quickly, he thought. There were only 100 Yikshas. But, with the addition of the devil monkeys, Prime Minister Turtle and gang, it would definitely speed up the rate at which the island was shifted. Prime Minister Turtle. Wang Xian called out, to which the former immediately moved over. Bowing his head, Prime Minister Turtle swam over to meet Wang Xian. Subject here, at your command. Prime Minister Turtle greeted. Bring roving heavens and the rest along. We'll shift this island over to the one where the past dragon sect base stood. Wang Xian ordered Prime Minister Turtle. It would be good camouflage to have the island shifted over, which would make it easier for Wang Xian to order its refurbishment thereafter. Yes, Dragon King. Prime Minister Turtle nodded. Following which, he gathered all the Dragon Palace members to set off immediately, as they prepared to shift the floating island over to the Bohai Sea. Wang Xian assessed the speed at which the island was shifting. He was very pleased even though it was moving at less than half the speed of a speedboat. As the Dragon Palace welcomed more members, or with rising abilities of their manpower, moving the floating island would also become much faster. To the extent where one day, perhaps Prime Minister and Roving Girl alone would possess enough strength or prowess to move the island at hasty speed. With that, Wang Xian returned onto the island and headed for the spiritual medicine garden. He wanted to test his abilities in the art of refining elixir pills. He had just arrived in the garden when he bumped into Mo Yuan and Mo Qinglong. Young master, the duo called out. What is it? Wang Xian asked. Young master, the Dragonians have come with an urgent report. It's regarding the murderers of Mo Ersan and Mo Sanyi. We've got information, Mo Yuan updated. Have they been found? Wang Xian questioned as he lifted an eyebrow. We've been informed that the selection day for the new saint and saintess of the Heavenly Sound sect has been brought forward. The ceremony will be held tomorrow and the day after, outside their sect ground entrance in the mountains. During which, the murderers will appear. Mo Yuan answered. But many of their sect experts will be present then. The possibility of the Abyss to carry out a successful assassination is nil, Wang Xian said doubtfully. According to the rules of the sect, once the candidates for the saint and saintess have been confirmed, they'll be protected by inborn experts. It's only when the Abyss has surpassed the inborn status that they will be able to succeed, Mo Qinglong elaborated. Dragon King, should Master and I strike together right away, or should we continue waiting? Mo Yuan asked. Since they've been found, we'll make our move. Wang Xian replied as his eyes narrowed. The venue for the selection of the saint and saintess by the Heavenly Sound sect, you say? The one who's able to order the mission is presumably a strong competitor for the saintess, he continued. Let's exact our revenge today. Mo Yuan and Mo Qinglong chimed in together. Chapter 320, A Zither as a Gift, 1. Wang Xian didn't like things to drag on in whatever he did. Since he had verified where the culprit had appeared, he would want to resolve this matter quickly. Heavenly Sound sect? Wang Xian pondered for a while before asking, among the sacred sects, what's the strength level of the Heavenly Sound sect? Among the 8 sacred sects, the strength of the Heavenly Sound sect is ranked 5th in the underworld. It isn't particularly strong but definitely not weak, replied Mo Qinglong. The 8 sacred sects and 5 sacred clans were the 13 strongest forces in China. Every force had a peerless expert that could send tremors to the entire underworld with a stomp of their foot. Heavenly Sound sect was located in Ning City. Wang Xian and the group had been there once. There wasn't any direct flight from Rivertown to Ning City. If they were to travel by car, it would take at least 8 to 9 hours. It's already past 2 in the morning. When we get to Ning City, it will be close to noon. Wang Xian looked at the time on his watch and had no intention of wasting any time. We will head there right away. Both of you, come with me. Let Mo Shiwu attend to the matters of the spiritual island. Besides that, get the Abyss along. This time, he was prepared to do this under the identity of the Abyss. Wang Xian still did not wish to enter into direct confrontation with a sacred sect. Moreover, with his current strength, he wouldn't be a match for a sacred clan unless they were in the seas. On land, his battle prowess was similar to a Dan realm expert. After witnessing the strength of Sui Huang from the Sui family, Wang Xian conjectured that there would also be Dan realm experts within these sacred sects and clans. Moreover, a sacred sect had a lot more inborn realm experts than Wang Xian. Since the Abyss was already known throughout the underworld, it didn't matter if their name got a little more publicity. Wang Xian revealed a faint smile. Since eliminating the Dark Conjurers, the Abyss was widely recognized as the strongest assassin group in the underworld. There were even some members of the underworld who believed that they possessed the strength of a sacred sect and was the most horrifying uprising force at this moment. Let's return immediately. Wang Xian said to Mo Qinglong and Mo Yuan. Yes, young master. The two of them nodded their heads. Wang Xian hesitated for a while, returned to the treasure room and took Zhan Lu and Hao Zhong with him. Her zither was destroyed because of me previously. I shall compensate her with this. At the thought of the cold expression of Tang Yinxian with her broken zither, he shook his head slightly. Holding Zhan Lu and Hao Zhong, Wang Xian headed towards the shore. A short distance away, a yacht awaited him in the middle of the sea. Other than his yacht, there were over 20 ships in the surroundings. Wang Xian jumped into the air and landed on one of the ships. He collected it as resources for his dragon palace before doing the same for the rest of the ships. Wang Xian felt it was a little wasteful to convert these ships directly into resources. When he returned to his yacht, Wang Xian placed the zither in his room. Lying on the bed, he soon fell asleep. The yacht moved rapidly. When he arrived at Rivertown, dawn had broken. Wang Xian hesitated for a moment. In the end, he did not make a trip back home first. Instead, he got Mo Qinglong to drive the caravan towards Ning City directly. When they arrived at Ning City, it was already noon. The 7 Dragonians from the Abyss had arrived before them. Wang Xian took out his phone, hesitating for a moment before dialing a number. Hello? You? From the other end of the phone call, a pleasing voice sounded. It was clear that she was shocked too. At this moment, Tang Yinxian was in a 5-star hotel in Ning City. Around the hotel, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect were hosting a banquet. A 1.8-meter-tall young man stood in the middle of the field. He was wearing a set of exquisite and traditional clothing, just like a prince in ancient times. He stood proudly with his chest up and a cup of red wine in his hand. A group of good-looking men and ladies surrounded him and were constantly showering him with compliments and pleasantries. The young man was the saint of the Heavenly Sound sect. He had just emerged victorious from the selection today and would likely become the future elder or even sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect. Tang Yinxian took a glance at the saint in the banquet before walking to a corner of the banquet. That young man had actually called her. She could still feel the palpitations and shock at the thought of the news she came across 2 days after she returned to the sect. At that time, the strength that the young man had demonstrated greatly shocked her. However, all her attention was on her broken zither. When she heard that the abyss had annihilated the dark conjurers, she stared blankly into space for over 10 minutes. She knew that the young man was taking revenge for his subordinates. After luring out the assassins of the Dark Conjurers and getting some clues, he went to annihilate the entire Dark Conjurer organization. In that case, the assassin group, the Abyss, was most likely his. Even a sacred sect had to be careful when dealing with the Dark Conjurers. However, the Dark Conjurers were easily annihilated by the Abyss. And now, the Abyss was classified as one of the existences that one shouldn't mess with. Recalling that young man and the Abyss, which was in the limelight recently, she felt conflicted. Tang Yinxian, I'm in Ning City. Are you free now? I'm sorry about your zither previously. Therefore, I brought you something this time. The voice of that young man sounded from the other end of the phone. This shocked Tang Yinxian. She frowned, hesitated for a while and nodded her head before answering, yeah, where are you now? LZZ International Hotel. LZZ? Tang Yinxian was taken aback. That's the hotel she was in currently. Tell me about your exact location. I'll look for you immediately. I'm in a corner of the restaurant lobby. Alight, wait there for me. I'll be right there. Tang Yinxian didn't reject Wang Xian. She was still curious about that mysterious and insanely powerful young man. Now that he said he had something for her, she would like to take a look. Tang Yinxian hung up the phone. She hesitated for a moment before heading for the exit. Junior sister Yinxian, where are you going? At this moment, a voice sounded behind her. Tang Yinxian frowned slightly but forced a faint smile out. Saint. She bowed respectfully and continued, I have some urgent matters and have to go out for a while. Oh? What urgent matters does junior sister have to leave in such a hurry? Are you worried about the selection tomorrow? The young man had a cup of wine in his hand and exhibited strong confidence. The vibes around him were something that even famous male stars couldn't match. Yeah. Tang Yinxian nodded her head customarily. There are some things I have to get prepared. Junior sister, if you agree to what I've suggested, I'll lend you the Sky Devil Zither. The young man stared at Tang Yinxian intensely. Thank you, Saint, for your kind intentions. I have some urgent matters to attend to and shall leave now. Once again, let me congratulate you on becoming the saint. Tang Yinxian frowned slightly, gestured and left. Saint, hasn't Tang Yinxian agreed to be your girl? What an arrogant girl. With her current standing, she's not qualified to be with you. That's right. Our saint is exceptional and will definitely become the management of the Heavenly Sound sect in the future. For that Tang Yinxian, her chances of becoming the saintess tomorrow couldn't exceed 10%. Senior sister who has over an 80% chance of becoming the saintess. Moreover, senior sister who is the daughter of our vice sect leader and is interested only in you. I feel that senior sister who is a better match for our saint. Behind them, a group walked forward and spoke to the saint after hearing his conversation with Tang Yinxian. Enough. The saint's eyebrows knitted together and he was clearly displeased. Senior sister who? That woman comes from a great background. Her looks and talents are also exceptional. However, she has already lost her chastity and couldn't be compared with the demure and pure Tang Yinxian. Chapter 321, A Zither as a Gift, 2. Seeing that the saint had turned restless, the crowd went silent in an instant. Some of the female disciples looked at Tang Yinxian from the back with faces of envy. How does a lass like you with no prominent background deserve favor from the saint? With curiosity in mind, Tang Yinxian walked towards the reception of the hotel restaurant. In favor of the saint's kindness, she paid no attention to the commotion behind. She had not been supported by such strong backing at Heavenly Sound sect. She had been discovered by a half-step and born from the sect by chance, and taken in as a disciple from there. Through her own efforts, she had ascended to become one of the top disciples in a short span of just over a decade. Yet, despite having achieved her current status as a half-step and born, she was not very confident in the face of the assessment today. Given that even the granddaughter of the vice sect leader also had to vie for the position of saintess these days, her master too had little confidence in her becoming one. She was bound to lose, should there be a competitor whose natural abilities were paralleled with hers, but came supported by rich resources and strong backing. This was something Tang Yinxian had found hard to concede. Where are they? Tang Yinxian asked as she came to the restaurant entrance. She swept a glance inside and saw a familiar figure at the far end. Walking over, Tang Yinxian looked at the party's surroundings. He was seated alone, whereas another two familiar figures sat at a table nearby. Our lovely Tang Yinxian, to think you made it here so quickly. Wang Xian greeted with a smile, waving as he saw Tang Yinxian approaching. The delicacies on the table had remained untouched. Alongside lay a precious sword and a box, where the latter resembled a zither casing. Somewhat doubtful, Tang Yinxian looked at Wang Xian and asked, "Young Master Wang, may I know the purpose of you asking me over?" With a warm smile, the current Wang Xian appeared gentlemanly and dashing. In fact, he looked much more elegant than the current saint. But Tang Yinxian knew better. This young man standing before her was highly likely to be the leader of the Abyss, the organization feared by many. Mainly to apologize over the issue of the zither from before. Wang Xian explained. He noticed that Tang Yinxian was not carrying any zither on her back. Likely to say, she had not found another one worth bringing around, after the one gifted by her late mother was ruined. You don't have to, Tang Yinxian declined upon the mention of zither. With a cold expression, she remained standing instead of sitting down. Seeing her slightly glum face, Wang Xian shook his head. I went to Ning City to settle some matters. It so happened that I obtained a zither yesterday, but I've got no use for it. So I'm giving it to you, he chirped. As he explained, he retrieved the zither of Hao Zhong and placed it in front of Tang Yinxian. I don't suppose you'll want to chat with me while standing. I was the reason why your zither was ruined. So here's one to make it up to you, he added. Tang Yinxian hesitated for a moment, before she seated herself across from Wang Xian and nodded. I'll decline the zither. Since you've helped to elevate my cultivation, we're even, she said in return. Wang Xian muttered as he rested his back on the chair. Take it. Having accepted $2 billion from you and being your bodyguard for several days. We're actually more indebted to you, to be exact. Wang Xian persuaded. Tang Yinxian procrastinated briefly, and looked at the zither on the table before shaking her head. I've already got one, she rejected again. Just take it as you're told. Accept it so we can call it even. Wang Xian persisted. With a tinge of dominance, Wang Xian placed the zither at a spot nearer Tang Yinxian. We may not be close. But even so, I don't wish to owe anyone anything, he continued. After which, he gestured towards the food on the table. Have you eaten? If you haven't, let me give you a treat, he invited. Lifting an eyebrow, Tang Yinxian nodded in reply, sure. She picked the zither up and placed it on her side, before picking up the cutlery and starting to eat. Wang Xian took a look at her before starting on his meal. Neither Tang Yinxian nor Wang Xian had uttered a word then. It was an admiration of aesthetics which Wang Xian had towards Tang Yinxian and her melodic voice. Other than that, he had no ulterior motives. As Tang Yinxian was a very slow eater, she had yet to be done even long after Wang Xian had finished eating. He played on his mobile phone, and had no interaction with her. It was a rather rare sight. A handsome man and beautiful lady seated together in a corner, having a meal, but with no interaction throughout otherwise. "I'm going off," Tang Yinxian said to Wang Xian upon finishing her meal. "Sure. It's already after 10. Time for me to head back and turn in as well," Wang Xian replied, smiling. Tang Yinxian looked at him with doubt before picking up the zither on her side. Carrying the zither on her back, she headed for the exit. Wang Xian walked alongside Tang Yinxian while holding his long sword. Once again, there was no interaction between them whatsoever. Both of them had just stepped out of the restaurant, when they heard a few shocked voices coming at them. "Oh? It's Junior Sister Tang," a voice called. "It's Junior Tang indeed." "Junior, didn't you say you were leaving early for an urgent matter?" another asked. Tang Yinxian stood dazed for a moment as Wang Xian remained by her side. Slightly taken aback, he too looked over at the crowd with gleaming eyes. A figure emerged in his mind, which stood in contrast to the group ahead. "There's a guy with her. Hey, look everyone. Junior Tang's carrying a new zither on her back," someone in the crowd exclaimed. "Who's that young man?" another asked. The group of disciples from the Heavenly Sound sect stared at Tang Yinxian in utter confusion. Tang Yinxian had left the saints' feast earlier in a hurry. Little would anyone expect to see her meeting a young man here. There seemed to be more than meets the eye with what was going on. Upon seeing Tang Yinxuan's look of shock, which was soon followed by a frown, the saint, who was walking in the middle, withdrew his smile. He scanned Wang Xian over before turning to Tang Yinxian, and asking coolly, "Junior Yinxian, didn't you say you had something urgent going on?" "I did, my friend wanted to give me this zither as a present. So I'm here to collect it." Tang Yinxian explained and met them with a calm look. "Oh? What zither is that?" "Senior's curious now, Junior. You've even rejected my Sky Devil zither." "I'm curious to find out which zither your friend has gifted you with," the saint refuted. As he smiled coldly, the saint turned to look at Wang Xian. He raised his head slightly and stared down at Wang Xian snobbishly. "Who's this friend of yours here?" "I'm the saint of the Heavenly Sound sect," he announced. "Just a nobody, here to present a zither as a gift." Wang Xian replied plainly as he looked at the saint. "Huh. No names mentioned, huh? By all means. I won't remember it anyway," the saint smirked. "Junior sister, what good zither can a nobody gift you with? Consider my offer. After all, it's your most crucial selection test tomorrow," he advised Tang Yinxian. Dismissing the saint's words, Tang Yinxian looked on with a face of dismay and annoyance. She turned to check on Wang Xian, to see if he had been offended. "A nobody? This gentleman here is most likely the leader of the abyss. How does that make him a nobody?" Right now, she was more afraid of Wang Xian, for fear that he may strike at this saint any moment and finish him off. After all, she was not sure if Wang Xian would be mindful towards a saint from the Heavenly Sound sect. "There's no need for that. But I'm thankful for your kind intentions, senior. As for tomorrow, I'll leave it to my own fortunes to see if I can make it as the saintess." Tang Yinxian excused herself graciously. "Junior Tang, you accepted a gift zither from a nobody right away, but kept turning down the help offered to you by a saint. Isn't this too much?" a female disciple snapped. She resented Tang Yinxian with a face green with jealousy. "That's right. How can a lousy zither from a nobody compare to the saint's Sky Devil zither? Junior, is there something going on between you and this lad?" another questioned. Chapter 322, Saint. One strike. Several female disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect mocked Tang Yinxian. They looked at her before turning to Wang Xian. When the saint heard what the other disciples had said, he was clearly displeased. He was the saint of the Heavenly Sound sect and had been wooing Tang Yinxian for some time. All the gifts he wished to give to her were rejected. For the saintess selection the next day, he disregarded the possibility of incurring the displeasure of the vice sect leader by wanting to lend his Sky Devil zither to her. In the end, Tang Yinxian rejected all his kindness and accepted a zither from an unknown person. Even he would not believe if one said there was nothing between them. Tang Yinxian heard the ridicule of her peers and was a little embarrassed. Cough cough. At this moment, Wang Xian coughed twice. He looked to the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect and said, "I'm sorry. If you guys don't know anything, please choose your words wisely. I'm a married man." Wang Xian continued, "A gift from an unknown person might not always be a shitty item. Besides, I have not heard of all your names either." Ha! Wang Xian's response made the crowd of Heavenly Sound sect's disciples raise their eyebrows. They looked at him and started scrutinizing him from top to bottom. "You have not heard of our saint's name? You must be cut off from the world. You can go look him up, the 9th-ranked youth on the Outstanding Young Heroes chart." "Hee hee. You must not have seen the world," a young man said with contempt. "He's just another frog in a well. The only question is which sect he's from. Tell us about it or let us see what you're capable of." The other young men lifted his head slightly and looked mockingly at Wang Xian. "Haha, if there's time, you will naturally be able to see it." Wang Xian smiled and replied with hidden meaning. "It seems like we have someone who is really confident about his strength. Instead of waiting for another day, why don't we do it today? Show us a little." Seeing how casual and relaxed Wang Xian was, the saint revealed a smirk. Moving his arm slightly, a long flute appeared in his hand. The metal flute spun in his hand and pointed at Wang Xian. Metal attribute aura circled the flute, giving off a sharp glow in the process. "This is my secondary weapon, Golden Imperial Flute. Saint, this rascal is clearly acting tough in front of us. How could he possibly compare with you? He's just a nobody who talks louder than what he's capable of. I, your junior brother, can easily defeat him." A young man smiled and looked at Wang Xian when he saw the saint take out his weapon. At this moment, he smiled mockingly and gradually placed both of his hands before his chest. Counter-integral. Suddenly, he chanted some music notes. The devilish music headed towards Wang Xian's ears. Suddenly, strong winds started blowing around them. The chilling cold wind turned into musical notes and struck towards Wang Xian. The young man stared at Wang Xian with a mocking smile. Clearly, he wanted Wang Xian to make a fool out of himself. The surrounding disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect also looked on with ridicule. As disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect, their methods of attacking were creepier than other sections. They could integrate their attribute energies into sounds. A strong and born expert with high music attainments could even make one lose his sense of direction and self. In their view, an unknown rascal tried to act tough in front of them. That would be equivalent to asking them to humiliate him. Crack! At this moment, a crisp sound of a sharp weapon propagated. A stream of metallic energy disintegrated all the wind attribute musical notes and headed for the young man's palm. Arg! The young man cried out pitifully and immediately moved his hands aside. Looking at his own palm, he was horrified. Long and deep wounds had appeared on his palms. They were so deep that one could see the bones. Fresh blood was oozing out from the wound. "You dare to attack me?" The young man revealed a pained expression. He held onto his arm and stared solemnly at Wang Xian. SSS. When the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect saw the injuries on the young man's hands, they gasped. Their pupils constricted as they stared at Wang Xian. Ha! The saint frowned and murderous intent gleamed in his eyes. He looked at the treasured sword in Wang Xian's hand and commented, "You are pretty strong, but you must be courting death to injure the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect." As he spoke, he moved the golden imperial flute in his hand and pointed directly at Wang Xian. The next moment, the metal attribute energy shot out. It was the disciple of the Heavenly Sound sect that had started this. However, they ended up chiding Wang Xian. How domineering and unreasonable. "Saint, this is a friend of mine." Tang Yinxian was shocked. She quickly moved to stop the saint from attacking. She was really afraid that the saint would offend Wang Xian and Wang Xian would kill the saint on the spot. Besides that, she was a little surprised by Wang Xian's attribute. If she had remembered things correctly, he was using water attribute attacks while fighting with the assassins from the Dark Conjurer. However, he was using metal attribute attacks currently. Your friend. Seeing Tang Yinxian blocking his attack, the saint's expression turned gloomy. He dares to attack the disciple of the Heavenly Sound sect. As the saint, I have to stand up for them. I'll cripple anyone who dares to injure us. Could it be that you, Tang Yinxian, wish to stop me? As he spoke, he stared harshly at Tang Yinxian. The anger in his heart raged even fiercer. Hee hee. You started the fight and yet tried to stop me from retaliating. Saint? I've really not heard of the Saint of the Heavenly Sound sect or the 9th rank existence of the Outstanding Young Heroes chart. In my eyes, Saint. Hee hee. One strike is enough. Seeing the young man before him trying to attack him, Wang Xian's expression turned chilly. He lifted Zhan Lu in his right hand. Dang! TSK. I'll let you know the consequences of being arrogant and talking big in front of me. Seeing that Wang Xian wanted to retaliate, murderous intent gleamed in the saint's eyes. He waved the golden imperial flute in his hand. Woo woo. As the air entered the long flute, rapid notes were made. A sharp metallic edge shot towards Wang Xian. Dang! However, Wang Xian drew Zhan Lu partially out at this moment. The intense metallic edge on it formed a razor-sharp golden sword. Before the sword left the scabbard, the glow of the sword had already been shot forward as an attack. The metallic edge from the golden imperial flute vibrated a little in the air before disintegrating rapidly. As for the sword glow of Zhan Lu, it slashed towards the golden imperial flute in the saint's hand. Pa pa! Before the saint could react to it, the sword glow had split the golden imperial flute and was striking towards his shoulders. What? The saint was horrified. He immediately dodged to the side. However, the razor-sharp sword glow still landed on his shoulders. Instantly, his clothes were dyed red from blood. Pa! The golden imperial flute split in the middle and fell to the ground, giving off a crisp voice. One strike was enough to split the weapon of the Saint of the Heavenly Sound sect and injured the saint. Trash! Wang Xian kept Zhan Lu away and looked nonchalantly at the crowd. Without having to pull Zhan Lu completely out of the scabbard, their saint was already injured by it. We will meet again if fate dictates. Wang Xian looked at Tang Yinxian and spoke with a smile. After which, he turned around and left, as he felt disinterested. Tang Yinxian stood rooted to the ground. After which, she turned to look at the figure behind her. Chapter 323, Appearance of Hao Zhong and the Soundless Instrument, 1. Insolence, blatant insolence. How dare you injure me? How dare you do this to a saint of the sacred sect, the saint growled. With a deathly stare, he glared ahead at Wang Xian, who was leaving. The contempt and the look of disregard made Wang Xian appear all the more indifferent. Leave your name. In no time, I'll slaughter you, with my own bare hands, the saint called out harshly as he watched Wang Xian from behind. Upon hearing the saint, Wang Xian stopped short and turned around to look at the young man. You've lost your chance, he mocked. In a fit of anger, the saint snapped in a grimace as his eyes filled with bloodthirst. He took a quick look at his arm and called out, I'll kill you soon enough. Wang Xian looked back at the saint. Smiling, he beamed with a glimmer in his eyes before turning to leave. Saint, are you all right? A voice asked. Saint, let me have a look at your injuries. I have some elixir pills with me, another called out in concern. The crowd of disciples had barely recovered from shock. To think that the saint had been injured by a nobody with one mere strike. Just how could this be? I'm all right, the saint brushed them aside. With a glum face, he took one look at the injuries on his shoulders. As he watched Wang Xian leave, a young man tried to appease the saint. Saint, Had the lad not snuck an attack, and had you brought your sky devil zither along, you would have maimed such a lad easily, he flattered. Humph, the saint replied impassively. Displeased, he looked at Tang Yinxian and pressed her for an answer. Who is he? Which sect or clan is he from? Upon hearing the saint's words, Tang Yinxian furrowed her brows and shook her head. Saint, I have something to attend to. I'll return to the sect now, she replied before making a direct exit. Hold it right there, Tang Yinxian. The saint is asking you a question, a female disciple of the Heavenly Sound sect yelled at Tang Yinxian. Ignoring the call, Tang Yinxian excused herself again. Apologies, saint. I'm feeling unwell. So I'll head back to rest, she said before hastening her steps. Feeling helpless, she sighed softly as she rushed back to the sect. Well, this Tang Yinxian, the saint rebuked. As he watched Tang Yinxian disappear gradually, he headed straight for the exit with a steely expression. Saint, a few disciples called out with unease. Go, get me details of the lad's identity, the saint ordered one of them as he turned his head back. Yes, saint, the crowd of disciples replied hurriedly, shocked by the comment. The saint of a sacred sect is not someone to be trifled with. Offenders shall die. As Wang Xian entered the presidential suite, he was immediately welcomed by Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and 7 Dragonians. Young master, they greeted respectfully. Just place the information you've got over there. Wang Xian replied. Acknowledging the gang with a wave, he picked up the documents and headed for the bedroom. Noted. Mo Qinglong and gang nodded, before they headed outside. Meanwhile, a worn-out Tang Yinxian returned to her room, located atop the 9th summit of Ning City's 9 Peaks mountain. As she placed the zither on the desk, she looked to the side, where 2 zither rested. One of them was covered in cracks, and bore obvious signs of repair. But repaired zither could no longer be used. As for the other zither, it boasted an all-green body which exuded both extravagance and beauty. This was a zither gifted to her by her master. This green zither had been obtained by her master at an overly exorbitant price. According to her master, it was a level 6 zither. As with all things in life, even weapons are classified by levels, as they are graded similarly to humans. In fact, where grading is concerned, only the classification of spiritual grasses and elixir pills differ vastly from the others. Weapons are graded in ascending levels. And where a weapon has surpassed level 9, it would then be named a metamortal spiritual weapon, also known as an inborn spiritual weapon. Inborn spiritual weapons possess a spirituality of their own. When a weapon ascends to such a level, it gains unimaginable powers. Take the ancient sword of Zhanlu which Wang Xian now owned, for instance. It is no sword to be owned by mere mortals, given that it possesses energy of the gold summit. An average martial artist could even be killed by the sword simply by holding it. Similarly, an expert martial artist of level 8 or above could challenge someone at superseding levels, simply by wielding the sword. So much so that a level 9 martial artist could kill a half-step inborn with the Zhanlu sword in hand, which is what makes an inborn spiritual weapon so formidable. That said, inborn spiritual weapons were few and far between in the current world, as there were barely any blacksmiths left. Along with the art of equipment refining being long lost, all current renowned weapons were the ones passed down from ancient times. Thus, this level 6 green zither gifted by her master was incredibly rare. Tang Yinxian looked at the casing which held the zither from Wang Xian. Its appearance was very common, and it even bore a trademark. Ling Yin. Tang Yinxian chimed, giggling as she looked at the trademark brand. Ling Yin was currently one of the top zither brands. An exquisitely customized zither could cost tens of thousands, while the pricier ones could even fetch more than $1 million. Yet, in her eyes, these supposedly branded zither were no different from the ordinary ones. They could not compare to the green zither gifted to her by her master, which currently rested by her side. To think an invincible expert of his times is this insincere. How miserly! Tang Yinxian pouted, looking really adorable. It appeared she would only reveal this endearing side of her when she was alone. How ordinary it is. It's also an ordinary zither which mother gifted me, she presumed. She had been prepared to reject this gift from the start, and hence gave little thought to Wang Xian's intentions. As she opened the casing, a simple yet classic-looking garnet zither emerged before her. Written on it were several traditional characters. On the center of the zither were two enlarged characters. Stupefied, Tang Yinxian stared at the two characters in a daze. Hao Zhong, she mumbled, repeating the name. Astounded, her face twitched in shock. She placed her hands on the zither immediately. Zing, ring, ring. Suddenly, a melodic note rang through her mind. She shuddered as though she had heard heavenly music. In an instant, she felt as though she was bursting with energy. Her vision became crystal clear, while the spiritual energy in her circled frantically. Hao Zhong. To think it's the zither of Hao Zhong. Tang Yinxian shook at the thought. She caressed the zither with trembling hands, sensing each chord as she went, her eyes filled with disbelief. Hao Zhong, the world's #1 zither. Used by the top zither artist in history, Master Boya. Subsequently passed on to Duke Quan of Qi, leader of the 5 hegemons during the spring and autumn period. Deafening as it plays, the zither chimes clear like a bell and trumpets like a blowing horn. Legend has it that the Duke played music on the zither during a war to boost morale. And because of that, he emerged victorious and rose to become leader of the 5 hegemons. Tang Yinxian murmured incessantly with burning passion in her eyes. Hao Zhong, the legendary and-born spiritual weapon. To think that this, she uttered under her breath. Gradually, she began to recollect herself as she continued to caress the zither. Just then, a thought came to her mind, and she flipped the zither over immediately. On the bottom hung an exquisite, long scarlet sword. It was known as the enchantment sword. Tang Yinxian bit her lip, blushing as her eyes glinted. To think that a married man would do something like this? Chapter 324, Appearance of Hao Zhong and the Soundless Instrument, 2. Enchantment sword, as its name suggested, was a sword of love. According to the latest historical records, Hao Zhong was given to a woman from her husband. Moreover, the husband had included the enchantment sword below the zither for his wife for protection. The enchantment sword was one of the famed swords in history. Although it wasn't as well known as the 10 famed swords, its strength was still well regarded and known by many. This was a sword for the ladies and was featherlight. It was forged from frost metal and the water from a frosty pond. The elemental attribute of the sword was water. It was said that it was just a tinge inferior to an inborn spiritual weapon. As it was kept with the Hao Zhong zither, it was recorded as Hao Zhong enchantment sword by historians. Recalling the information regarding Hao Zhong and the enchantment sword, Tang Yinxian couldn't help but pout. She removed the enchantment sword from the bottom and unsheathed it. Shings! As the sword was unsheathed, the sound it made was pleasing to the ears, like flowing water. The entire sword was red other than the edge of the blade. It looked extremely stunning. The sword was light but exceptionally sharp. It was as though there was water flowing on it. Tang Yinxian waved it lightly and the water energy raged. She wasn't well versed in swordsmanship and only knew a little about it. She looked at the bottom of Hao Zhong. Just as she had expected, there was a sword manual in it. The sword manual recorded the enchantment swordplay. Hao Zhong is an inborn spiritual weapon while the enchantment sword is a weapon exceptionally close to the level of an inborn spiritual weapon. Tang Yinxian held them dearly and was really satisfied with them. However, at the thought of the meaning behind these weapons, her expression changed. Since I have accepted them, just forget about the hidden significance behind them. She smiled gently and placed the Hao Zhong back into the cover carefully. Looking at the bright moon outside her room, her mood greatly improved. She walked back to her bed and started her rest. The next morning, the entire Nine Peaks mountain was shrouded in a festive-like atmosphere. Beautiful music could be heard and the surrounding birds were dancing in the skies. Other than the alluring music, calls of various birds formed a beautiful melody. Thousands and thousands of birds were flapping their wings and moving with the music. All the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect had to practice their musical instruments and cultivate in the morning. It was especially so for today, as the entire Nine Peaks mountain was filled with all kinds of music. The selection of the saint had ended yesterday and the selection of the saintess would start today. Tang Yinxian carried Hao Zhong and arrived at the backyard just like any other morning. She gently cleaned the place where she would be placing her zither. Placing her zither on the table, the surrounding music had not affected her emotions. Tang Yinshuan's eyes lit up as she looked at Hao Zhong before her. She placed her slender and fair fingers gently upon it. Ling! A musical note sounded. At this moment, this note resounded rapidly throughout a radius of 1,000 meters. What happened? Why did my zither go soundless? This is strange. What is happening? That musical note previously erased all other sounds. What is this about? What's the issue? Why is my era not making any sound? At this point, raucous discussion broke out around her. Exclamations and questions came from disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect in all directions. Tang Yinxian was taken aback. She stared with her eyes wide open at Hao Zhong, which was placed in front of her. With a bitter smile on her face, she kept it away and returned to her room. At this very moment, a woman on the main peak of the Nine Peaks mountain opened her eyes abruptly. What's that sound? Could it be the Heavenly Sound zither? It doesn't sound like. It doesn't sound like. The woman stood up, closed her eyes and wanted to listen attentively. However, the same sound did not come again. In the end, she sat back down, feeling baffled. Fong Tianhua became the saint yesterday. I wonder who will become the saintess today. Do you even need to ask about this? It will definitely be Senior Sister Hu. Senior Sister Hu is now a half-step to Inborn Realm expert and possesses the level 7 ancient temple zither. Among the female disciples, she tops in terms of strength. It's still hard to tell. Tang Yinxian, Fang Jiuhua and Ouyang Yan have all reached the half-step to Inborn Realm. They are also strong contenders. In my opinion, Senior Sister Hu's chances of winning are at least 80%. Strength is just one aspect and you should consider their influence too. Many people are supporting Senior Sister Hu now. Moreover, Senior Sister Hu has 2 half-step to Inborn Realm subordinates. One of them even made it to the top 20 of the Outstanding Young Heroes chart. When the sun had risen, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect made their way towards the main training field. On their way there, the disciples were discussing fervently. However, they weren't too concerned about what had caused their musical instruments to go soundless. Tang Yinxian carried 2 zither as she made her way to the main training field. Along the way, the other disciples greeted her respectfully. There were also some disciples who simply gave her a cold glare. The main training field of the Heavenly Sound sect lay in the middle of the Nine Peaks mountain. The Heavenly Sound sect didn't particularly have lots of disciples. For young men and women, there were only approximately 1,000 of them. They had exceptional demeanors and were either handsome or beautiful. In terms of looks, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect were all outstanding. Despite that, Tang Yinxian still shone brightly with her exceptional vibes and exquisite looks. The disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect arrived at the training field one after another. They stood in an orderly fashion around it while waiting patiently. The arrival of Tang Yinxian had drawn the attention of many people. Other than her, there were also a few other girls who were exceptionally attention-grabbing. Senior Sister Hu is here. At this moment, a scream came from the crowd. Everyone looked over and saw an alluring young lady with an enchanting figure walking towards the training field. She was dressed in black and looked just like a succubus in the night. Every action of hers drew the attention of all the men in the field. A large number of male disciples couldn't help but swallow their saliva. She was one of the few disciples that practiced the Fei Fei demonic note. 2 young men followed behind the young lady proudly. Despite being surrounded by outstanding disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect, they were still carrying a slight sense of superiority. Take a look. Senior sister who didn't bring her ancient temple zither along but another zither instead. That's true. It looks a little ordinary. However, with senior sister whose strength, others wouldn't be a match for her even if she used an ordinary zither. The saint is here. At this moment, the saint, who was dressed in elegant Heavenly Sound sect's traditional costume, walked out proudly. Over a dozen disciples followed behind him deferentially. The saint's face looked devoid of expressions and seemed exceptionally cold, callous but exceptional. Saint, the surrounding crowd greeted the saint respectfully. The saint nodded his head faintly, walked to a seat below the stage and sat down. This was a seat reserved for the higher management of the Heavenly Sound sect, and the saint naturally was qualified to have a seat too. Soon, the elders, vice-sect leader and sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect arrived at the training field. Chapter 325, Appearance of Hao Zhong and the Soundless Instrument, 3. Greetings, sect leader, the disciples greeted as they bowed to an elder who was gradually making his way to the central seat. As he lifted an arm, the leader of the Heavenly Sound sect swept his glance across everyone present, and began to speak. Meanwhile, 10 masked men from the abyss emerged in a secluded corner just outside of the Nine Peaks mountain. These 10 men were none other than Wang Xian and his gang. The information which Mo Yuan and the rest had obtained did not seem out of the ordinary. In addition, as a sacred sect, the Heavenly Sound sect had managed to cover their tracks well enough. Hence, the group could only sneak their way in by means of their incredible abilities and combat powers. The Heavenly Sound sect is unlike the Flame Palace. As a long-established sacred sect, their defense is no doubt more complicated than one can imagine. Wang Xian explained. After which, Wang Xian and gang peered at the 9 gigantic summits with heavy looks on their faces. Yet, other than its impressive heights and majestic beauty, one could barely detect any sense of danger from the 9 summits. They seemed to be nothing more than 9 ordinary mountains. Yet, it was the seeming mediocrity of the mountains which cautioned the group. After all, the Heavenly Sound sect was not the Flame Palace, hence its defense was anything but simple. Wang Xian gazed at the 9 typical mountains ahead as he narrowed his eyes. In a quick movement, he changed his position and hopped onto a tree along the fringes of the mountain. Tweet, tweet. Just then came a chirp from a tree branch beside Wang Xian. It was a bird, staring intently at Wang Xian as it called out. Soon after, the little bird flew towards the 9 Peaks mountain and within its vicinity. Ha! Wang Xian frowned in confusion. With quick reflexes, the power of the divine dragon oozed out of him and overshadowed the surroundings. Tweet, tweet. The little bird flapped its wings as hard as it could, before it flopped onto the ground. So that's how they work. Wang Xian exclaimed in realization. With a grin, he continued, no doubt a sacred clan. Even the mode of defense is beyond expectations. Wang Xian observed his surroundings, and noticed an overwhelming number of nests. These bird nests came in all sorts, and had settled on the branches of trees all over 9 Peaks mountain. He even briefly spotted a nest which spanned about 6 to 7 meters across, located thousands of meters away. With such a gigantic nest, one can easily imagine the size of the bird settling in it. It must be a flying bird of the inborn level. The Heavenly Sound sect has resorted to using flying birds as implicit sentinels numbering up to the tens of thousands. Perhaps even the millions. Seems like there's no way of hiding any entry into the sect grounds, Wang Xian assessed. He was mildly impressed by the sect, which no doubt deserved its sacred status. By using millions of birds as surveillance, even a mosquito flying in would be clear for all to see. That said, these birds can't be that intelligent. They also possess obvious shortcomings. Wang Xian exclaimed with a faint smile, while Mo Qinglong and the rest scurried over. Let's go. Wang Xian directed. But, as he was about to make a move, a bunch of tree branches clung onto Wang Xian and gang, twining them in like saplings. In one leap, he sprung forward. The birds around looked over in curiosity. But they soon became indifferent once again, and continued to chirp incessantly while resting on the branches. They were, after all, ordinary birds with low intelligence. To the extent that some of them had no idea as to why these few saplings could actually move. The 10 men shot through the 9 Peaks mountain at lightning speed, and in no time arrived at the peak of one of the mountains. Over there. Wang Xian pointed as he narrowed his focus. In a flash, he landed mid-mountain on one of the nearest summits, and stared coldly at the training field. Meanwhile, at the training field, a girl dressed in all black was suspended in mid-air with a black devil zither. Across from her stood another girl with a refined and graceful face. Panicking while cold sweat trickled down her forehead, the young maiden clung onto her pipa as she battled the girl dressed in black. Standing beside Wang Xian, Mo Qinglong looked at the training field, where Hu Qingqing was. That's the girl, Hu Qingqing. Based on the most confidential information from the Dark Conjurers, she's the one who issued the assassination orders. Mo Qinglong pointed out coldly. Not only did she order to have Tang Yinxian killed, she's also involved in 2 other missions, alongside that young man standing at the fringe. The other 2 assassinations were carried out successfully, he added. Wang Xian surveyed the girl in black, who boasted a charming face and a glamorous figure. How unscrupulous. Resorting to killing a fellow sect member for the saintess position. Vile as a woman's heart, more poisonous than a viper's bite or a hornet's sting. Wang Xian said coldly as he observed. Thereafter, he swept his gaze across and counted silently. There are a total of 7 inborn experts, with more absent. They've either hidden themselves within the 9 Peaks mountain, or gone traveling. Wang Xian contemplated in silence. Just 7 inborn experts alone was a handful. Moreover, members of the Heavenly Sound sect were known for their incredible combat powers and powerful attacks. However, Wang Xian and gang had not come to annihilate the Heavenly Sound sect. Rather, they were just here to kill Hu Qingqing. In addition, they need not clash with the sect. Young master, should we just charge over and slaughter her right away? Mo Qinglong asked as he stood beside Wang Xian. Kill! Wang Xian ordered. He had just uttered the word, when he looked below and froze in his tracks. Hold on, he shouted. Yep. Mo Qinglong and the rest nodded in response, and hid away quietly. Senior sister who's too powerful. She's holding the legendary Copperhead Viper Zither in her hands. That's a level 9 Zither. Goodness, where did she get that from? An audience member gasped from amidst the crowd. A level 9 Zither, plus senior whose prowess as a half-step inborn, in addition to the unique art of cultivation of our Heavenly Sound sect, senior who's almost unrivaled amongst the half-step inborns, another added. Seems like it's more or less decided that senior who will become the saintess. She's too powerful. To think that senior sister Fang Jiu was totally defenseless against her, one more chipped in. It feels like senior whose prowess is about to overpower the saints, a last commented. And there was Hu Qingqing, standing on the stage. With a charming smile, she fought on without a care in the world. Around the training field, the crowd of disciples watched on in shock and admiration all at once. The senior management of the Heavenly Sound sect also gazed at Hu Qingqing, pleased with her performance. The prowess she displayed was simply impressive. The Copperhead Viper Zither's a level 9 Zither. It's enough to qualify as the 3rd most powerful Zither within our Heavenly Sound sect. To think that Qingqing managed to obtain it, a senior praised. I'm taken by surprise too. The Copper Viper Zither along with Qingqing's Fei demonic note. She'll be unrivaled in the world of inborns, another commented. Congratulations, Vice Sect Leader. You found a successor, a third cheered. On the stage, several elders chatted in whispers to the Vice Sect Leader. Seated in the middle, the Vice Sect Leader responded with a hearty laugh. His granddaughter would soon ascend to become the saintess. On the training field, Hu Qingqing eyed Tang Yinxian coldly. A look of disdain swept across the former's eye as she glanced at the latter's green zither. Tang Yinxian, just concede defeat. You're no match for me. Nor are you qualified to exchange blows with me. Hu Qingqing gloated. Tang Yinxian had been in another battle earlier, where she had defeated Ouyang Yan using her green zither. And although her skills were up to par, it had taken her a long time before she emerged victorious in the battle. This was a huge contrast to Hu Qingqing's easy win. Let's have a fair competition, where both of us will use an ordinary zither. Tang Yinxian suggested to Hu Qingqing in a composed manner. Huh. Fair competition, using an ordinary zither. Tang Yinxian, are you kidding me? Hu Qingqing laughed. Chapter 326, If the Abyss Wants You Dead, You Definitely Will Be, 1. A peal of hysterical laughter broke out from Hu Qingqing. Although her laughter was exaggerated, her alluring voice with her trembling enchanting figure made it hard for one to find it annoying. Instead, seductive vibes came from her. Hu Qingqing laughed loudly before looking to Tang Yinxian again and saying, Tang Yinxian, you must be acting naive. Strength includes weapons, cultivation arts, and cultivation realm. You want a fair battle? Hee hee. What a joke. As she completed her words, she played her copperhead viper zither lightly. Instantly, several demonic snakes appeared before it. I have gone through great lengths to get this copperhead viper zither. You want me to compete fairly with you without it? Hee hee. Ridicule sounded and the surrounding people looked at Tang Yinxian with doubts. Cough cough. Tang Yinxian is really something to raise a request like this. She's really shameless. Haha, that's right. This is the most interesting request I have heard. A fair battle in her view is to restrict her opponent from bringing out a powerful weapon. I'm really impressed. The thickness of Tang Yinxuan's skin is something we couldn't compare with. She's simply shameless. I'm speechless. To obtain the position of the Saintess, she actually raised such a hilarious condition. This Tang Yinxian must be crazy. She couldn't make it. I have long heard that Tang Yinxian rarely interacts with others. It will seem like she's most likely an idiot to raise such a request. Around the training field, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect didn't attempt to hide their ridicule after hearing Tang Yinxuan's request. Based on the current situation, senior sister Hu would be certain to inherit the position of Saintess. Therefore, the surrounding disciples weren't wary of Tang Yinxian at all. Furthermore, they might be able to get on the good books of senior sister Hu by doing so. Huh. Tang Yinxian, you are really interesting. Weapons are naturally a part of one's strength. You want a fair battle? You are really hilarious. Read more chapter on VIP novel. Calm, at this moment, the saint who was seated commented. He looked mockingly at Tang Yinxian and continued, you don't have a good zither and so you want to restrict others from using one. TSK. This thought is shameless. That's right. What a naive thought. Senior sister who has a level 9 unique zither and yet you want her to compete with you on an ordinary zither? In a life and death battle, will one put aside such a unique zither and compete with you on an ordinary zither? A young man standing beside the saint seconded and piled on the ridicules. The saint's expression turned callous. He mumbled softly, if I lend you my level 7 Sky Devil zither, you might still have a slimmer of hope. If you use that level 6 zither, your chances of becoming the saintess are 0. Oh, Tang Yinxian, you really don't know what's best for you. When I get the information on the brat that gave you the zither, I'll let him experience pain worse than death. The selection of the saintess is to show the wisdom, strength, guts, and means of the future saintess. You can keep such a laughable request to yourself. The vice sect leader seated on the stage looked proudly at her own granddaughter before glancing coldly at Tang Yinxian. If you know what's best for you, admit your defeat immediately. If you continue, I'll defeat you. You aren't qualified to compete for the position of saintess with me. Hu Qingqing said to Tang Yinxian with contempt. When Tang Yinxian heard the ridicules from the surrounding disciples, she was taken aback. A cold light flashed in her eyes. In that case, I would like to seek guidance about your strength. Just as she finished her words, she placed her green zither aside. Carrying the other zither, she jumped and landed in the middle of the training field. She stood in the middle of the training field, tapped her arms lightly, and the zither box behind her appeared in front of her. What? Look at the logo on the zither box. Isn't that just an ordinary brand available everywhere? It is. Could it be that Tang Yinxian has given up on using the level 6 green zither and is choosing to use an ordinary zither instead? She's probably worried that the Copperhead Viper zither will destroy her level 6 green zither. After all, that was the best zither Tang Yinxian could come up with. That's highly likely. When the surrounding crowd saw the logo and brand on Tang Yinxian's zither box, they started looking at her with mocking eyes, insulting her. Hee hee. What a waste of my time. Hu Qingqing looked at the zither box in front of Tang Yinxian. Coldness gleamed in her eyes as she said nonchalantly, "Within 5 moves, I will destroy your zither." I hope so. Tang Yinxian was nonchalant about the ridicules from the crowd and Hu Qingqing. She tapped the box lightly and sent it flying down. Please enlighten me. When Hao Zhong appeared before Tang Yinxian, her entire demeanor underwent huge changes. Cold, prideful with a tinge of holiness. She placed her slender fingers on Hao Zhong. The zither her mother had given her was where she deposited her longing for her mother. As for this dull red Hao Zhong, it was the zither she really liked. Hee hee. I'll let you witness the might of this legendary zither and hand you a convincing defeat. Hu Qingqing's expression changed as she appeared to have become one with the Copperhead Viper zither. On her arms, music notes coalesced from the demonic aura that was circulating and flowing constantly. How many strikes do you think senior sister Hu will need to defeat Tang Yinxian? Within 10 strikes. Although Tang Yinxian also possesses half-step to inborn realm strength, the might of the legendary zither isn't something an ordinary zither could possibly match. My guess is within 5 strikes. Didn't senior sister Hu say she would at most take 5 strikes? Seeing that the battle was about to start soon, the surrounding crowd was thrilled. The saint looked at the middle of the training field and Tang Yinxian emotionlessly. Using an ordinary zither from an unknown and insignificant character against Hu Qingqing with a legendary zither, she must be asking to be shamed. SSS. At this moment, Hu Qingqing started playing. Her 5 fingers appeared to have become demonic claws as they moved rapidly on the Copperhead Viper zither. At that instant, a venomous snake made of eerie and cold energies swept towards Tang Yinxian rapidly from the Copperhead Viper zither. As Hu Qingqing moved her fingers even more quickly, thousands of venomous snakes appeared. They emitted horrifying aura and attacked forward in a wave. Senior sister Hu's attacks are too strong. Tang Yinxian is likely going to be defeated by this strike. When the surrounding disciples saw what happened, they couldn't help but gasp in awe. Tang Yinxian wasn't flustered at all despite facing a large wave of venomous snakes. She placed her hands on Hao Zhong. Just as the venomous snakes were about to hit her, she played Hao Zhong lightly. Ling! At this instant, the surrounding crowd felt as though a downpour had fallen on them. Sounds of rain resounded in their minds. That wave of demonic snakes was flushed towards the floor and dissipated as though it was made of ink. Chapter 327, If the Abyss Wants You Dead, You Definitely Will Be, 2. Ding-a-ling. The zither began to play, where the notes earlier were just the opening of a tune. Yet, when the music resumed, the crowd realized that the rain they were surrounded by had begun to trickle like a gentle river flowing. A mystifying image appeared in everybody's minds. Just then, Hu Qingqing stood across from the crowd with her eyes wide. Her facial expression changed drastically, as she watched the sight before her in utter disbelief. Her body began to tremble as her face grew dark and gnarly. Her demon claws frantically strummed chords on her copper viper zither, and bouts of demonic aura slithered on the instrument. Hurriedly, the aura gathered and transformed into a demonic snake. Yet, Hu Qingqing was appalled to discover that her recital using the Copperhead Viper zither had produced not a single sound. As though the flowing waters were the only existence around right there and then. Her face showed an unwillingness to concede defeat. Demonic aura then oozed out from her, forming numerous demonic snakes on the copperhead viper zither. Ah! Hu Qingqing snarled while she arched her head skywards, and puffed out demonic breaths. The demonic breaths too transformed into snakes, and within a short 2 minutes more than 1,000 of them had formed. The demonic snakes exuded a chilling and steely demeanor, and began to attack in Tang Yinshuan's direction. Just then, the streams of flowing water glowed in sapphire and surged straight ahead for the snakes. Once again, the demonic snakes were rendered defenseless. They resembled ink paintings which were watered down and swept clean, as though they had never existed. What's the situation? How? How did I get immersed in another world? Hu Qingqing shrieked in surprise. Soon after, the crowd of disciples from the Heavenly Sound sect recovered as though they had just regained consciousness. They gazed towards the arena, looking somewhat lost. It's the realm of music. Goodness, to think we've been dragged into a mirage of music, one exclaimed. How is this possible? This can only be achieved if one is an inborn expert of the ancestral clan. Otherwise, who's able to? A second doubted. This sound, goodness, to think senior sister who's been totally suppressed, the third gasped. It was then that everyone focused their attention on the ongoing battle in the training field. They could see Hu Qingqing strumming away at the zither like a prancing maniac, and yet they could not hear the slightest sound. On the contrary, Tang Yinshuan rested her fingers on her zither with a look of tranquility while standing across from Hu Qingqing. In a state of serenity, she started playing, and streaks of water flowed gently down the instrument. The snakes released by Hu Qingqing were wiped out by these gentle flows. The crowd also discovered in shock that the training field had been unknowingly submerged in blue waters. The streaks of sapphire flowed like a stream. Meandering its way over, it moved over to Hu Qingqing and began to circle, as though to envelope her. What's this situation? Why can't I hear Senior Hu's melody? There's only the sound of flowing water I hear. What's going on? A voice questioned. Suppression. It's the legendary absolute suppression. The copperhead viper zither's been absolutely suppressed. To the point where its melody has been completely overpowered by that of another zither's, another explained in astonishment. Suppression? How's this possible? The copperhead vipers regarded as a legendary level 9 zither, another argued. A look of disbelief swept over the crowd of disciples. To think that a level 9 zither was unable to produce any notes. This inborn spiritual weapon. To think it's an inborn spiritual weapon, a voice blurted out. Meanwhile, on stage, the senior management of the Heavenly Sound sect was startled. Even the sect leader stood up flabbergasted, as they all turned their eyes to the zither alongside Tang Yinshuan. What? One gulped. How's this possible? Another gasped in disbelief. A zither that's of the inborn spiritual weapon level. How's this possible? Our entire Heavenly Sound sect has only got one zither of the inborn level. The Heavenly Sound zither. To think Tang Yinshuan has got one too. The third uttered. If it isn't a zither that's classified as an inborn spiritual weapon, how could it have suppressed the copperhead viper zither like this? The disciples exclaimed at the top of their lungs. Overwhelmed by shock, they stared at the zither in Tang Yinshuan's hands with glistening eyes. That's the zither of Hao Zhong, one of them yelled. To which, Tang Yinshuan began playing once again. She strummed her fingers against the strings gently. In an instant, the surrounding waters flowed over in Hu Qingqing's direction, ready to strike. A zither that's classified as an inborn spiritual weapon. An inborn level zither, one shouted. Hu Qingqing's face soured when she heard Tang Yinshuan's melody. She cringed upon seeing that the water flow was coming at her and, with a quick shift, darted for cover. It was then that she looked down at her legs in shock. She was horrified to discover that unbeknownst to her, her legs had been entwined by the water flow. As though caught in a swamp, she was unable to free herself from the entanglement of the water no matter how hard she resisted. Such powerful binding force. Senior Hu's losing. She's actually losing, someone choked. It's only been under a minute, and Senior who's about to be defeated, the second voiced in shock. Hao Zhong. Isn't that the zither of Hao Zhong, the number one zither amongst the legendary top 10? The third exclaimed. To think it's the Hao Zhong, the one regarded as the most powerful of all zither. Its ranking is even above the heavenly sound zither, another added. Hao Zhong. To think it's the zither of Hao Zhong, the last choked. Upon hearing her words, and seeing for themselves the attack which Tang Yinxian launched, the crowd was overwhelmed by shock. On stage, the senior management from the Heavenly Sound sect eyed the zither intently while it lay in front of Tang Yinxian. Hao Zhong, to think it's the Hao Zhong, the leading zither of all, they muttered. A horrid look was plastered across the vice sect leader's face, while his heart ached like it had been stabbed and was dripping blood, as he watched his granddaughter cocooned in the streaks of water. You've been defeated. Tang Yinxian announced before she stopped strumming with her fingers. To which, the sound of flowing water disappeared. The crowd turned their heads immediately, and saw that Hu Qingqing had been wrapped up tightly by the streaks. And even though Hu Qingqing struggled till her face turned crimson, the wrap remained entirely unaffected. Such is the horror of the Hao Zhong, along with its prowess. The crowd watched on dumbfoundedly as the scene unfolded before them. Hu Qingqing had been defeated. Furthermore, the defeat had struck upon her so easily and thoroughly. It was as though Tang Yinxian had barely used any of her combat powers, and delivered a sweeping attack with such ease. Like an adult sparring against a child. Yet, everyone was well aware that Tang Yinxian owed her prowess and dominance to the formidable zither. Zither of Hao Zhong, an inborn spiritual weapon. At the same moment, the crowd recalled the request made by Tang Yinxian prior to the start of the competition, whereby they would compete fairly using only ordinary zither. Back then, everyone had mocked Tang Yinxian for having lost her senses. They also ridiculed her for being thick-skinned by asking her competitor to use an ordinary zither instead of a formidable one, simply because she had none herself. It appeared now that the truth was, in fact, the complete opposite. She had in her hands an inborn-level zither, and had been out to compete fairly with Hu Qingqing after all. At the thought, the faces in the crowd sizzled in red. They had gauged the kindness and nobility of others using their own mean measures. How could this be? How could that chap, with nothing to his name, have gifted Tang Yinxian with an inborn-level zither? This can't be. It's impossible, the saint uttered as though in a daze. As he did, he focused on the zither that rested in front of Tang Yinxian, remaining seated right behind. Chapter 328, Killing Openly. I admit defeat. On the training field, Hu Qingqing mumbled out 3 words bitterly. Everyone around could hear these words clearly. As she admitted her defeat, the water flow around her dissipated completely. The surrounding disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect were shocked as they witnessed what had happened. Similarly, members of the higher management of the Heavenly Sound sect were dumbfounded. They looked intensely at the Hao Zhong zither in Tang Yinxian's hands and took a deep breath. Tang Yinxian wins and will succeed as the saintess through her own strength. If anyone isn't satisfied, you may step forward now. The sect leader looked across the crowd and her attention eventually fell on Tang Yinxian and the powerful zither. The surrounding disciples had all quieted down. No one was speaking at this moment. The qualities and strength Tang Yinxian had demonstrated had made these disciples speechless. In fact, she had won many over. At this very moment, the surrounding disciples felt more embarrassment. Recalling the ridicule and mockeries that they made about her previously, they felt flushed. There's no way they could still step forward to object to the outcome. Puff! Hu Qingqing took a deep breath bitterly. I'm not convinced. The selection of the saintess also involves influence and respect from others on top of one's strength. Just as she spoke, the 2 young men who had been standing beside her previously moved and came to Hu Qingqing. A strong aura emanated from them. Hu Qingqing looked at the 2 young men behind her and revealed a faint smile. While I was cultivating diligently for the last 2 years, these 2 half-step to inborn realm experts have followed me. Moreover, they have established a second-class force. Currently, I can mobilize. As Hu Qingqing spoke, she seemed to have regained her confidence of before her defeat. She lifted her chin up and spoke loudly to the crowd. Hua la. However, another voice sounded from above when she was still speaking. All the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect were taken aback and lifted their heads in shock. Hu Qingqing was caught by surprise too as she turned towards the source of that voice. The higher management of the Heavenly Sound sect was surprised and looked coldly towards the sky. A book flew down from the sky and towards the sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect. At the same time, 10 men in black uniforms and the abyss masks leapt down from the mountain peak. When the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect saw the abyss masks, they were stunned. These masks. They are from the abyss. They are assassins from the abyss. At that instant, the same name flashed across the mind of the disciples. Some even exclaimed out loud. Dressed in black and wearing abyss masks. They are assassins from the abyss. All the disciples were shocked. The abyss was the most horrifying assassination group currently. After annihilating the dark conjurers, they were widely regarded by the underworld as being closest to a sacred sect. In fact, many regarded them as a horrifying organization that possessed equivalent strength to a sacred sect. Why would the people from the abyss appear in the Heavenly Sound sect? All the disciples were alerted. They held their weapons tightly in their hands and observed the 10 assassins that had landed in the training field attentively. Rumble. At this moment, all the members of the higher management of the Heavenly Sound sect, who were seated at the elevated stage, stood up. Among them, there were 7 inborn experts. They immediately released horrifying aura and glowered at the 10 assassins from the abyss. Hu Qingqing felt suffocated as she looked in horror at the 10 assassins from the abyss that were standing around her. She didn't dare to say a word at this moment. The 2 young men standing beside her were petrified. They no longer had the arrogant vibes from before and were on alert. Paw! The sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect caught the book that was thrown towards him and glanced at Wang Xian and his group. He squinted his eyes and coldness gleamed in them. Assassins from the abyss, what are you guys here for? Asked the sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect coldly. Obviously, to kill someone. Wang Xian looked at the sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect and didn't attempt to hide his intention at all. Presumptuous. You dare to barge into the sacred grounds of the Heavenly Sound sect to kill? The abyss is really brazen. When an elder heard Wang Xian's brazen claims, he picked up the long flute weapon coldly and glowered at Wang Xian and the group. Murderous intent gleamed in his eyes. How arrogant and brazen. The sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect turned gloomy. He held the book and asked coldly, "What is this?" "Take a look and you will know the person we are killing," replied Wang Xian emotionlessly. When his voice came through the mask, it became mechanical and cold. This made the surrounding disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect anxious. 10 days ago, 2 of our disciples accepted a mission and were assassinated by the Dark Conjurers. The Dark Conjurers were naturally acting according to the orders of their employer. Therefore, we, the Abyss, have annihilated the Dark Conjurers and found the mastermind. Now, we are here to kill her. Wang Xian stared right at the sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect and spoke emotionlessly. However, his response made the surrounding disciples gasp. Finally, they understood why the Abyss had annihilated the Dark Conjurers. It was to take revenge against the Dark Conjurers for killing 2 of their disciples. To find the mastermind, they had annihilated the Dark Conjurers. Domineering, horrifying and unable to assess with common sense. The sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect could feel his eyebrow twitch. Clearly, he found this answer too shocking and chilling. The Abyss was too domineering and brazen. The remaining inborn experts of the Heavenly Sound sect had all picked up their musical instruments and placed them in front of them. They were all prepared to engage in battle with the imperious Abyss instantly if required. The sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect looked at the book in his hands. After going through the information in it, his face sank gradually. The information in the book was printed out. There wasn't any concrete evidence. "This couldn't be considered as evidence and can't prove anything," replied the sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect after looking through the information. "Our abyss isn't interested in falsifying evidence. We are just letting you take a look. We are still going to kill the mastermind," Wang Xian remarked coldly before turning to Hu Qingqing. Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and the Dragonians also turned to Hu Qingqing. Their eyes were filled with killing intent. "You deserve death for engaging the dark conjurers to kill 2 of our disciples." Wang Xian stared at Hu Qingqing and remarked coldly. Just as he finished his words, Mo Yuan struck. Overwhelming killing intent surrounded him. It was so dense that it appeared to have materialized. Turning his 5 fingers into claws, he struck towards Hu Qingqing. At this moment, Hu Qingqing's face was as white as a sheet. Cold sweat covered her forehead and horror filled her eyes. She no longer had the same flirtatious looks, arrogance and confidence as before. When she saw the approaching Mo Yuan, she screamed in horror. "No! Why are you guys killing me? How dare you kill my granddaughter? The abyss must be courting death." Murderous intent gleamed in the eyes of the vice sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect. Moving his fingers across the zither, demonic aura turned into sharp edges and attacked towards Mo Yuan. Rumble. At this moment, Wang Xian waved his arm. A fireball flew towards the sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect and exploded. Caw caw caw. The zither broke after a single strike. Chapter 329, Indomitably Haughty. "No! Ah! Save me, Grandpa!" a scream shrieked from the training field of Heavenly Sound sect. Along with the blood-curdling scream came an explosive blast. The zither of the vice sect leader had been destroyed with a single palm strike. When the crowd saw what had happened, they gasped and cringed in fear. The faces of the 6 inborn experts fumed with rage when they saw the abyss assassins approaching. Courting doom, one of them hollered. Zing, zing, zing. As melodies began to play, countless wind blades, water droplets, demonic snakes and golden needles were fired out from the musical instrument. Howl! Right then, a growl from the divine dragon came blasting through the air. Following which, an inferno divine dragon situated itself in front of the 6 inborn experts, blocking them. Flames torching like molten lava came spewing out of the inferno divine dragon, which put a direct stop to all the attacks. In the same moment, Hu Qingqing gazed ahead at Mo Yuan in utter despair. "Ah!" she cried while taking steps back. While the 2 half-step inborns beside Hu Qingqing broke out in a cold sweat, neither of the young men dared to take a step forward. "Die!" Mo Yuan roared. Without the slightest hesitation, his fingers transformed into claws of the devil dragon, as he struck at Hu Qingqing in a bid to attack. Ack, ack, ack. As Hu Qingqing landed on the ground, she coughed with a weak voice void of hope while she stared, eyes wide in terror. Equals. Even on the brink of death, she didn't have the slightest clue as to who from the abyss she had killed, and why they got rid of her so menacingly. She had been radiating with glamour on the stage of the training field just a while ago, with high hopes of vying for the position of saintess. And yet, the same Hu Qingqing now lay motionless and lifeless on cold ground. "Abyss, you're goners. I'll get rid of you all," the vice sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect roared. As he burst with fury, bouts of demonic aura gushed from the training field and shot skyward. Clang, clang, clang. Just then, a frantic melody started to play and it boomed throughout the 9 Peaks mountain. It had come from the musical instrument held by the leader of Heavenly Sound sect. Tweet, tweet. Tweet, tweet. Upon 2 chirps, 2 birds swooped over from individual mountain peaks, surging as quick as fighter planes as they flapped their gigantic wings. "Trespassers in the Heavenly Sound sect shall die," a voice hollered, as numerous shadows came darting out of the 9 Peaks mountain. Upon emerging, they flew over short distances. It was 7 elders who had flown out, each gripping onto a musical instrument and exuding a terrifying aura as they did. Especially so for the elderly lady who emerged atop the most central peak, who displayed an air of dignity with a sparkling zither in her arms. Leaving their mountain peaks, the experts landed on the training field. They were joined by the two giant birds, which measured up to 5 meters with wings spread open, as they gazed down upon Wang Xian and gang. With icy stares and gnawing claws, the birds were ready to attack any time. Abyss assassins, you guys are indeed savage. With guts to barge into the sacred grounds of our heavenly sound sect, you can forget about leaving here today. For you shall be buried within our grounds for eternity, said the elderly lady flatly. With her zither in hands, she swept her gaze across Wang Xian and gang. Huh. Seems like the heavenly sound sect's bent on keeping us here till our deaths, with no means to compromise, huh? Wang Xian asked. In a cold demeanor, he surveyed the 14 inborn experts. Did you think you could leave, after killing our sect members? The elderly lady asked without the slightest cringe on her face. She remained expressionless despite being face to face with the renowned Abyss. So what if they are the Abyss? The heavenly sound sect hath no fear. Huh. With just the few of you. Wang Xian let out a laugh. With a deathly stare, he continued, those with the guts to kill members of the Abyss must be prepared for death. Should the heavenly sound sect dare to intervene, then let's have a fight. We'll see who's to be wiped out first. As Wang Xian's obnoxious statement trumpeted throughout the entire heavenly sound sect, the entire senior management could not help but narrow their eyes in fear. They took a look at the formidable 7-metered Inferno Divine Dragon, which currently stood in front of the Abyss assassins. Thereafter, they eyed the particular Abyss member, recalling how he had just destroyed the vice sect leader's zither with a single palm strike. To which, their faces stiffened in vigilance. They were obnoxious beyond tolerance for challenging the sect to see which party would first perish. This made them either lunatics or powerful opponents. All around, the heavenly sound sect disciples watched on in silence, as cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. Ha! The elderly lady expressed out of perplexity. She frowned upon hearing Wang Xian's words. Supreme Elder, the leader of Heavenly Sound sect greeted as he walked over to the elderly lady, placing a booklet in her hands. Her face twitched as she scanned through the records in the booklet. Her slight surprise was now replaced with anger in her eyes. Is this information reliable? She asked. It was the Abyss who tossed them over, the sect leader replied. Check. Deploy all manpower from our Heavenly Sound sect, and check thoroughly on this matter. Check, even if it should cost any lives, the elderly lady snapped in a rage. To think that a candidate had resorted to employing assassins to get rid of competitors, in order to vie for the position of Saintess. This was a taboo to the Heavenly Sound sect. Utterly shocked, the rest of the sect disciples stared at the Supreme Elder. They were clueless about what had caused such anger from the Supreme Elder. Even should our disciples from the Heavenly Sound sect have erred, it'll be up to us to handle it. By stepping onto the sacred grounds of our sect to commit murder, you Abyss really have no regard for us, have you? The elderly lady rebuked blatantly, tossing the booklet at the sect leader. Huh. Let me tell you, old fogey. We've already killed your men. Should you dare stop us, we'll let the Heavenly Sound sect run in a bloodbath. Wang Xian fired back at the elderly lady. Slightly agitated, he glared at the rest of the sect. On the other hand, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and the rest of Wang Xian's gang were oozing with bloodthirst. Having massacred over 1,000 dark conjurers previously, each of them had come with blood-stained hands. When their thirst for blood was unleashed, it was more than enough to spark terror. As for Wang Xian, he too was exuding a strong aura of the Divine Dragon, which shot straight ahead for the senior management of the Heavenly Sound sect. With his prowess on full display this time, even the air had intensified as it began to sizzle. The ground below Wang Xian's feet began to crack apart, and as it did, the crack widened and extended northwards. Roar! The Inferno Divine Dragon let out a growl before it descended in front of Wang Xian and transformed into a smaller, 1-meter dragon. The dragon rested its head on Wang Xian's shoulder while staring right ahead at the crowd with its cold and emotionless eyes. The air of invincibility was enough to spook the senior management from the Heavenly Sound sect. Such stance, the elderly lady panicked in a brief moment of fear. She could feel an element of fire sizzling up all around her. She even had the hunch that the surrounding air would begin to burn, should that particular one from the abyss will it too. Dan Realm, he must be an expert from the Dan Realm, an elder standing not too far away mumbled with a burdened look. They're unrivaled, given that Laozu's currently away, the leader of Heavenly Sound sect squeaked softly. Having figured out Wang Xian's abilities, a tinge of fear flashed across his eyes. What is it? I've already killed your men. Aren't you going to strike? Wang Xian asked as he gazed past all the inborn experts from the Heavenly Sound sect. Chapter 330, Kill the Saint, Leave with Ease. The taunt resounded within the Heavenly Sound sect. However, the entire Heavenly Sound sect quietened down after Wang Xian's voice died down. No one dared to make a move. The expressions on the inborn experts from the Heavenly Sound sect were changing rapidly. The atmosphere instantly chilled. Around them, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect were shocked and horrified. Feeling that unrivaled aura, their bodies were shivering in fear. They were surprised to see that the members of the upper management of the sect did not react to the taunt. There were 14 inborn realm experts and 2 inborn level sacred birds from the Heavenly Sound sect right now. However, they didn't dare to attack the 10 assassins from the abyss. It's him. It's definitely him. At this moment, Tang Yinxian stared intensely at Wang Xian from the side of the training field. Even though he was wearing the abyss mask, she could still recognize him. That familiar figure was his. The amiable young man who had brought her an inborn spiritual weapon as gift yesterday was currently in their sacred sect and had killed the granddaughter of her vice sect leader. The scene of Wang Xian standing upright and facing off against the experts of the sect greatly shocked her. What incredible strength and imposing stance. Tang Yinxian couldn't match the figure of the person she had met and had a meal together with yesterday with the one in front of her eyes currently. However, she was certain that it was him. Huh. If you guys aren't going to fight, we are leaving then. Wang Xian laughed out loud and looked haughtily at the group. Behind the mask, he revealed a faint expression of ridicule. Oh right. At this moment, Wang Xian turned his head around. The experts of the Heavenly Sound sect stared bitterly at Wang Xian. Murderous intent and shame filled their eyes. Old hag, you were too arrogant previously. Moreover, the disciple of the Heavenly Sound sect have killed 2 disciples of ours. I have to kill another one. As he finished his words, his figure disappeared from sight instantly. The next moment, Wang Xian appeared before the saint of the Heavenly Sound sect. Don't you dare. When the old lady saw Wang Xian appearing before the newly crowned saint in an instant, she was infuriated. She played the Heavenly Sound zither instantly and sharp wind blades shrouded towards Wang Xian. Wang Xian didn't even look back. Waving his hand back, the dragon head around him enlarged. Roar! A wall of flames neutralized all the wind blades. Seeing this, the experts of the Heavenly Sound sect gasped. This was how horrifying and invincible a Dan Realm expert was. At this moment, Wang Xian stared coldly at the horrified saint of the Heavenly Sound sect. He was the young man who provoked him the previous day. No. We have no qualms. No. Please don't kill me. At this moment, Wang Xian could no longer see the arrogance and haughtiness from the saint. He pleaded for mercy in horror and his face was filled with cold sweat. He almost wanted to kneel on the floor. Didn't you say you were going to kill me personally? Wang Xian looked mockingly at the saint of the Heavenly Sound sect and repeated the ruthless words he had said to Wang Xian the previous day. What? The saint was lost in the instant. However, a figure quickly flashed in his mind. His eyes popped wide open and were filled with disbelief. It can't be. How can this be possible? His inner self was screaming in despair. That rascal from yesterday, that insignificant guy from before. He's actually the leader of the abyss. He's the horrifying existence that all the experts in the sect didn't dare to go against. Yet, he had actually made a bold claim to kill him the previous day. He felt strength being sapped away from his body as he slumped onto the chair behind him. His eyes were filled with despair. "Tsk." Contempt gleamed in Wang Xian's eyes. Waving his arm, intense flames shrouded the saint. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Abyss. A deep growl came from an inborn expert of the Heavenly Sound sect. Wang Xian turned over and laughed. "Now that we have taken our revenge, the Abyss shall no longer have any feud with you guys. Obviously, if you guys aren't satisfied, our Abyss wouldn't mind playing with you." The hysterical laughter resounded throughout the training field. Subsequently, Wang Xian jumped and left rapidly. Behind him, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and the other Dragonians followed closely behind and left the Heavenly Sound sect. The members of the upper management of the Heavenly Sound sect pulled long faces and looked bitterly at the rapidly disappearing figures. They couldn't help but feel helpless. "If our Laozu was here, we wouldn't have had to suffer such grievances," the sect leader of the Heavenly Sound sect growled bitterly, clenching his fist tightly. 10 assassins of the Abyss had barged into their Heavenly Sound sect and killed 2 of their disciples right in front of them. One of them was the granddaughter of the vice sect leader while the other was their saint. They showed no regards and killed them in a domineering manner. "Puff! I'll report this to Laozu. Besides this, settle this matter as soon as possible." The old lady took a deep breath. She stared at the book in the hands of the sect leader and instructed coldly. The Abyss had killed their disciples. This was something they would want to make them pay for. However, the one who had offended the Abyss and resulted in them killing the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect would receive punishment too, regardless of whether she was already dead. Nonetheless, they wanted to investigate this matter thoroughly. If there were people supporting these people in the dark, they shall not be forgiven either. The old lady took a glance at the vice sect leader before leaving. The surrounding few inborn experts also pulled long faces as they moved towards the main peak to discuss the matter. "That's too horrifying. The Abyss is simply too strong. They actually managed to intimidate our experts from taking actions. Their strength has definitely reached the level of a sacred sect. Otherwise, our Heavenly Sound sect wouldn't be that wary. Perhaps it's because our Laozu isn't around and the Supreme Elder didn't dare to act rashly. The assassin from the Abyss is too strong. Look at our training field. Even the tough flooring of the training field has cracks of over 10 meters long. Is he still human? Our saint was killed directly. He's really unlucky." The Abyss is indeed incomparably horrifying and domineering, just as the rumors said. The saint hadn't offended them but was still implicated in this. The surrounding disciples exchanged glances and whispered softly among themselves. For the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect, it was as though they had experienced a 10.0 earthquake. The self-proclaimed Invincible sect was invaded directly and the invaders even killed on the ground. This had doused their arrogant attitude with a cold basin of water. How did Senior Sister Who offend the assassins of the Abyss? From what their leaders said, it appears that Senior Sister Who had employed the Dark Conjurers to assassinate their disciples. At this moment, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect thought of a question when they looked at the corpse on the stage. The crowd was confused, baffled, surprised and shocked. Who would have expected things to develop like this? Tang Yinxian looked at the Hao Zhong in his hands before looking in the direction where the saint had been reduced to dust. At this moment, she couldn't help but sigh. She knew why Hu Qingqing had been killed and also the reason why the saint had eventually been reduced to dust. All of these things were simply the consequences of their actions. The pride of an expert isn't something they could offend. They were too arrogant. Tang Yinxian shook her head slightly and placed Hao Zhong back into the box. After today's incident, the position of the saintess was almost certainly hers.